Welcome in the latest episode of that SEC podcast. I'm your host, Michael Braden. I go by SEC Mike on Twitter. And again, flying solo, Cousin Shane, not on the show this week, at least not on this part. He's going to be featured throughout because we're still on with our SEC Media Days Rewind. We're doing it just like the events. So we're talking Georgia, Auburn, Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, and we got interviews from Chris Marler, Saturday Down South College Football Uncensored, Braden Gall, 440 Sports Athlon, ESPN Radio, Rusty Mansell, the man himself, Mike Griffith, always delivers, Nathan King, Auburn, Undercover, 24/7 Sports Network, and Stefan Krajisnik from the Clarion Ledger, and Chris Lee, Vandy Sports. Let's get into it here. And like we did, I think we liked the format last episode, starting with some SEC-specific content. Before we get into the teams, let's kick it over first to Chris Marler interview. He's been on the show a number of times. He's getting better. I kid. This is the best one he's ever done. Really fun back and forth between he and I. So I think you guys will really like this appearance by Chris Marler.
I just have this camera looking directly at me, so I don't look that bad today.
No, it looks great, I think.
Lighting. Yeah.
All right, yeah. Saturday Down South's
College Football Uncensored podcast.
Chris Marler.
Yeah.
What else are you doing? You're doing everything. Do you work for Delta? I was confused. So many Delta tweets this weekend.
No, I don't think Delta's ever going to talk to me again. There's a better chance that my ex is talking to me than Delta, for sure. Because Delta was, if I wanted to fly Spirit Air, I would have flown Spirit Air. But this time it was like, listen, we are fancy Spirit Air. It'd be like if I went to I don't know, Hall's Chop House and I got like a McDouble. I love a McDouble.
Yeah.
From McDonald's, it's my favorite burger. But also I wouldn't have gone to Hall's to fucking get that. Excuse my language. To get that. We're not live, right?
Nope.
No, you can cuss.
What's been the highlight of Media Days? I know you just skipped one day.
Yeah, well, I didn't skip, but Delta forced my hand on that one. I thought the Kirby thing was interesting. The way he addressed everything, I think it's very interesting. The fact that Alan Judd got fired today after all of that.
Is that real?
Oh,
Shane,
yeah.
Shane tells me stuff. I don't believe him half the time.
Same. Well, honestly, Shane, same for whenever he tells me stuff. I don't believe anything he says. No, so apparently that happened. I think, he just continues to be, I think, the most impressive person when it comes to speaking to his team through the podium. I just really enjoy listening to Kirby. What he's building has been incredible to watch. It's not a secret. Anybody that knows me, I don't necessarily like their fans on Twitter, but I love watching what he's building because it's so damn impressive from every single angle. So that part was cool. I thought the Bama stuff was interesting today because...
But was it, though? I know Kirby came out. It felt like he had a mission and a statement he wanted to get out there, but it felt like we got the same old Saban.
Oh, I'm not talking about Saban
either.
Okay. What was interesting for me about that was the players being so candid about their confidence going into the season.
Yeah.
Usually you're under... the leash is always on
with
Saban, right? And so Kool-Aid Shane was phenomenal.
Yeah.
First off, but hearing J.C. Latham, I didn't necessarily love the whole thing about our standard is still above Georgia's because I think that just the saying the standard is still both those programs are elite. They're both trying to win national championships. One of those programs is performing to that standard, and that's Georgia. It's not Alabama. I think hearing that, and then Dallas Turner saying openly that they want to return to joyless murder ball made me happier than anything I've felt emotionally, and I don't even know how long, because that is that's such a Gump saying, Gump Twitter type thing of being joyless murder ball. But that's what I know you hate him, but that's why I'm excited about the Tommy Rees thing. Not just because when I wear a hat we look alike, but also because of the fact that I think they're going to get back to running the football behind a massive offensive line, and I think that schedule's going to be tough early with Texas. But I love the fact they get. Some of those games that were close last year, that were on the road, they get all of them at home.
I know that's the game plan, but what happens if the offensive line does not live up to it? I'm not a big believer in the offensive line coach. Mm-hmm. They've had a number of 5 stars, and they haven't lived up to the hype. What gives you the confidence that they can just flip that?
I think that, like, at some point, like Latham and who was the other? They brought in 2 5-stars. They were the number top 1 and 2. Brockmeyer or something like that. He's out at TCU now. Bama has missed a lot on the last couple of years. You could say they missed, or they might just not be developing them. Like, right. They're definitely not developing at the same talent level as Kirby is in Athens by any means. I think that the amount of like just sheer size they brought in, like Caden Proctor, this 6'8" kid from Iowa, I think he's going to have a chance to play early. I just have a feeling that, like, not to make an excuse, but I do think that you saw it more through these past recruiting cycles. It's some places where you did miss on some of these, like, these recruiting rankings and these 5-stars because of, like, the COVID years, and, like, it's hard to, like, necessarily get out and see. Like, I mean, a lot of these kids are robbed of their senior seasons anyway. I think that's probably contributed to some of it, not just at Bama, but in general in college football. I do think there's a lack of development, and I do think at receiver and offensive line specifically, I just think that at some point it has to get back to what it was. But, I mean, I could be totally wrong. So, like you said, if what's the Mike Tyson thing? Everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the mouth.
Yeah.
Yep. What the scary thing is for Alabama is if you get to November and you've lost to Tennessee again and you've lost to Texas. I think they're losing to Texas. If you lose both those games and you have no chance of winning a national championship, and then you're going into November, and then you get LSU, and then you got to go on the road to Jordan-Hare at Auburn, then I could see the whole 3-4 loss type situation, because what are they going to play for?
Right.
That's like the nightmare.
If Bama did sneak into the playoffs last year,
oh my God,
who would have won the national championship?
Not Bama. They shouldn't have been in the playoff. No,
I just want to make sure.
No, like that was. I remember when everybody was asking that. Like 2017. Here's been my thing about Ohio State, right? Like they won the SEC, or they won the Big Ten or something like that one year, and but they lost at Purdue by like 28 or 31 or something like that to an unranked team. The thing that's different, and I know you like to bring this up all the time, Mike, that game they lost at A&M was the first game they lost to an unranked team in 100 games. First time in 100 games they lost it. Haven't lost one since. But I think that, they should not have been in the playoff. And if they did, listen, if we're being honest, as like a diehard like Bama fan, growing up and stuff like that, but also an objective, rational person sometimes when I haven't been drinking.
Starting today?
This is a new beginning. I wanted no part of Georgia. I wanted no part of Georgia. I didn't want to play. I wouldn't have wanted to play tennis. There's 5 or 6 teams I don't think Bama would have beaten last year, and we saw they didn't beat.
Yeah.
Are you mentally prepared?
Oh God.
For Vol Twitter when Tennessee whoops Bama's ass in Bryant-Denny this season?
I'm not mentally prepared for Vol Twitter ever.
Okay.
Ever.
That's the right answer.
Last year, Vol Twitter was so awful to me personally because of a accurate prediction that I made. I can't imagine if I say that they're going to lose to Bama and then they beat them. I can't imagine like the vicious attacks that would come from that. That is like, and I get that it's Vol Twitter, but last year was a little bit. Last year I did not enjoy.
I will say Vol Twitter obviously has had the crown for a while.
Of what?
But there's just volatile Twitter base.
Yeah.
But let me ask you, there's some other programs sneaking up that list. Is there, if you were to power rank 2 and 3?
Oh, Georgia's up there.
Georgia's up there.
I coined this phrase last year, and it's like, I still, you're starting to see it now, but this whole, like, I call it being horny for disrespect. Like, this whole idea of, like, nobody respects us. Like, that was so wild to watch. And you see, okay, here's the thing. I hate to give this guy even, like, any fucking mention at all, but I'm going to. I'm not going to say his name, but there's a guy on Twitter a couple weeks ago who put out a list, and he started listing people by name, like actual people in the media. This guy has Bama. This guy has Bama. This guy has Michigan. This guy has... And, like... I'm looking over this list because somebody sent it to me, and I was like, none of this is real. Nobody has said this. Like, and he's like, we're getting so disrespected by the national media. And then you see it become a story from, like, Dog Nation Daily, which is, like, an actual, I thought, like, credible, and probably still, is a credible, like, source. And they're like, Georgia fans just want to feel, like, respected, like they're and acknowledged as the number 1 team in the country. And you flip through Phil Steele or Lindy's or Athlon, and it's like they're number 1 in everything.
Yeah.
Like, just because one person said, it's like, that is the worst one. Ohio State has always kind of been up there.
Yeah.
Bama's tough. Bama's fans are worse in real life.
Yeah.
I mean, they're bad in general, but they're worse in real life for sure.
Does Alabama lose 3 games or 4 games this year? You have to pick one.
If I have to pick one, I would say 4 between the two.
Yeah, me too.
I know you two. You've been doing this for. This is like. I mean, yeah. Listen, let me just tell you a story, Mike. I thought I was going to get married, and look at how that turned out. Remember, I just kept kept moving the date back.
Yep.
That's kind of what you've been doing with this 4 loss
usually
prediction.
the first sign.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks a lot, COVID. Yeah. So Anyway, no, I think that what scares me is I brought that whole thing up earlier about like the getting to November. Mm-hmm. There's a real chance that Auburn wins 5 games in a row going into Jordan-Hare for that game. And if you're a 2 or 3 loss Bama team with nothing on the horizon, like you don't have, like, say you lose to Texas and then you lose to LSU, so your national championship hopes are hanging on by a thread and probably aren't really there, right? You'd have to win out and win the SEC to have a chance. But if you lose to LSU, and LSU is what, they have 1 loss and they have the tiebreaker.
Yeah.
You walk into Jordan-Hare with nothing to play for, and we saw how that looked in, like, you know, in other years, like 2013 when they did have a lot to play for, or like 2017 when they were number 1 in the country. I don't remember the last time they've gone to Jordan-Hare with nothing on the line. I just don't think it would go. That is the worst possible scenario for Alabama, is to walk into that game, because I think that has a chance, just like with Heupel. With Saban probably on his way out the door in the next 3 to 5 years, you have a chance to turn those rivalries back and take all the momentum for both Tennessee and Auburn for the next several years before they figure out who's going to be the next coach.
Yeah.
As an Alabama guy, who scares you more, Hugh Freeze at Auburn or Jimbo at A&M?
Listen, it's I can answer on both sides because
or steps with old age. I mean, we got to throw that out there. I mean, you said 3 to 5 years. I mean,
okay.
What would that put Saban at? 92, 93?
No, first he's only 71. But I'm glad that you said steps with old age, because what I was going to say, what scares me about Jimbo is in Biden's economy, just getting crippled here with a $67 million buyout is outrageous. I think the answer is Hugh, because we've already seen what he can do recruiting. He does such a. See, here's the thing. What people don't talk about enough with Hugh Freeze is the quick turnarounds that he's been able to have. When he was at Arkansas State, right, he won 10 games his first year. Arkansas State didn't have a winning season for 15 years prior to him getting there. He gets 10 wins year 1. Ole Miss, they had lost.
That can't be right.
That's 1,000% right.
Wasn't Brian Harsin there and Gus Malzahn there? They didn't have winning seasons?
At Arkansas State?
He was the first?
Yeah. They had one.
I don't believe you.
Okay, they had one in the last 23 years, and it was 1995, and they went 6-5. In the 23 years prior, yeah, him getting there.
That was great.
Yeah, so they were on a roll that year. But no, I think that, like, then you look at Ole Miss. Ole Miss had a losing record in 6 of the 8 years prior to that. They had 1 SEC win in the 2 years combined prior to him getting there. 1-15. He gets 3 wins. He wins the Egg Bowl, takes him to a bowl game year 1. The quick turnaround, and now he has a place where he can recruit to, and has resources. Because like, you guys are Tennessee guys. I've said this since the start of NIL. Places like Tennessee, Miami, I think will probably at some point hopefully make a turn. But places like Tennessee, where you have a national footprint to recruit from, and a very starved fan base and booster like group that wants to win now, man, that's Auburn. Like they want to win. They want to win now. And again, they have a real good opportunity to turn the whole thing around from Alabama.
Well, going off that, I mean, we talked about Brian Kelly. Mike's got him winning a national championship.
Stupid, yeah,
I mean,
sure.
year 2, I agree.
Yeah.
But
Genius.
The pressure. You know, I mean, Hugh Freeze coming in, the expectations are already high, you know, because the only stat they're throwing out there is how many times he's actually beaten Nick Saban.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So, like, how quick do you think this thing ramps up where they're actually competing with Alabama?
I mean, I think in the nightmare scenario I said earlier, I think they can compete with a lot of things going their way this year. I would say year 3 is probably the one for me, and strictly because they get him back in Jordan-Hare. He's going to have his players in. Because he mentioned this several times yesterday. I thought it was kind of telling. He brought up the fact that he said at one point in time, I thought I was one of the best play callers in all of college football. And what makes you a great play caller a lot of times is the players you have to call those plays for. And we had a lot of great players at Ole Miss and blah, blah, blah. And you know, he obviously had Malik, what's his name, Willis at Liberty. But he mentioned, he said, we don't really have he's like, I like our roster. I like our QB room better than probably most. But, like, we don't have the roster. And he listed off, like, 5 or 6 teams. I think he included Florida in there, which is like, damn, if your roster's not up there with Florida, we got a problem. But I think he will turn that around very quickly. And in year 3, when you get him back in Jordan Hare, I think they'll start competing then. But it's also tough because now you got OU and Texas coming in.
Have you done your ballot yet?
No.
No. Who do you have winning the West?
Alabama.
Yeah.
Don't start with me. Okay. First off, how many years have you had them winning the West?
Last year.
You did.
I was wrong.
Yeah.
Bullshit.
That was the last year.
Who's the third? Who do you got third in the East?
Third in the East. Oh, that's tough. So I think Heupel's got a lot to show me, but I have them at 2. I do.
Yeah.
I think Kentucky's going to be better than people think. And it's because of something you said about how their schedule is basically just Georgia's, but you look at their logo and it's blue and white instead of red and black, and that's all we're talking about. So I think that Kentucky is going to have a good season. It's the schedule. It could be kind of tough, but I just think they have an improvement at quarterback, man. I do, and I'm going to continue to, I guess, disrespect Shane Beamer ignorantly and dumbly because he's proven me wrong every step of the way.
Yeah.
And since I live in Columbia, South Carolina now, I kind of just want to keep that train rolling for good luck because it's so awesome what he's been able to do. But that schedule's not easy, man.
What's the vibes like down there? They're
hot as shit. It's so hot.
Well, the expectations, though. I mean, they're all fired up, right?
They are. They're real fired up. And I think more than anything is beating Clemson last year was just like the monkey off your back on that, and doing it in Death Valley, right?
Yeah.
The back-to-back wins, beating Tennessee was cool, I think, for them, and you put up all these points. I think
that's a signature win for a lot of people. Is it?
Mm-hmm. For Georgia State, it was for sure. So I think that when you talk about Tennessee going there, that's a revenge game, obviously this year. But South Carolina beating Clemson the next week.
Yeah.
I think if you replay that Tennessee game, even if Milton plays the whole game, 9 times out of 10, I think Tennessee wins that game. But if you're talking about Clemson going down there and beating them, they would. I think they would have traded that for anything else that happened last year.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I mean, obviously, they like to remind Vol fans of the score.
Yeah,
but
they ran out of fireworks.
Everybody I talk to, it's like not even close, not even a second guess. It's Clemson.
Well, I mean, let's think about y'all's season last year, right? You
Yeah.
start this year, you have this great win at Pitt. You go to Death Valley, take over the stadium, run them out of the building, basically. I mean, like, I'm kind of making a joke, but it's real because it's a rivalry, and people forget how intense the Bama-Tennessee rivalry was. I mean, we didn't like each other for a long time, and
I still don't.
that's fair. I mean, no one hates me as much as I hate myself, so that's fine. It's my therapist always says. But like with Tennessee and Bama, that was a very intense rivalry, even though it was kind of streaky. I mean, Tennessee, they printed books afterwards about like the season, and we're halfway through because of how significant of a win that was. And I tell you one thing I do respect about it is there's a little bit from both of those teams. There's a little bit of 2019 LSU feelings about it where. Yeah, we went 11-2. We lost to Georgia. We lost to South Carolina. But by God, we won that game, and you cannot take that away from us. And so there's like this feeling of not complacency, but like being content and happy, even though you might not have got to ultimately where you wanted to be. Because it's like again, a monkey off your back and a huge program win for two really young coaches.
Is there a team in the SEC that you think everyone's sleeping on?
I mean, Mike with Alabama for sure. I kind of feel like A&M a little bit. I kind of feel like A&M, and I kind of feel like I don't think Mizzou is going to win the SEC East.
Yeah.
But I do think they're going. They returned eight or nine starters, however you want to look at it, on that defense. That was a pretty stingy defense last year. Yeah. I don't think they beat Georgia, obviously, but I didn't think they'd play them that close a year ago either. So I think people are sleeping on Mizzou. I think people are sleeping on A&M just because the roster still has a ton of talent. And like, man, there's just no way they could be as bad as they were last year. I mean, they were awful. That offense was awful.
Yeah.
Still almost beat Bama, beat LSU, close in that Auburn game. I think there's a reason. Like, if you look at Bobby Petrino's offenses, man, I think a lot of people – I looked into this a little bit just because – with Ryan Mallett passing, everyone, you look back at some of those Arkansas teams, people forget how good those Arkansas teams were because of Bama and LSU being so good as well. But Bobby Petrino can still dial it up, man. And I think that they will have a big turnaround this year. Yeah. They better hope they do.
Give me your hottest take preseason.
I'm going to lose the weight.
It's a Same with us, man. That's our take.
Every year.
Every year. I might
Oh, wait, they got cake?
Yeah, bro. I've been in Nashville for like a little over 24 hours now, and I've had 6 hot dogs, which is outrageous. That is not okay. Hottest take for this year, I don't think a team from the SEC wins the national title.
Wow.
I think Ohio State wins the national title this year. Sorry.
God, let's get his ass off the show.
Okay,
that is. We can still edit this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Mike will find a way to edit it like to where I say something horrifically bad. No, I think that Ohio State is going to be way more talented than people think, and they also get the benefit of playing the Big Ten.
Do you think? Well, let me ask you on that note, because last year that's what everybody talks about is a game of inches. Mm-hmm. Ohio State barely lost that against Georgia. But then you see Georgia kind of come out, and it feels like some of these games that they really are dialed in on, Tennessee being one of them, TCU being another, it just feels like they just came out and just beat the shit out of them.
Yeah.
Do you think if Ohio State, knowing the way it happened, if they got down and played the very next week, do you think we still have a close game between Ohio State and Georgia?
Oh, man, Georgia fans are going to hate hearing this, but does Marvin Harrison Jr. play the full game?
Everybody's healthy.
Ohio State, yeah.
Yeah.
Because, and here's the thing. Georgia knocked him out of that game, and they won that game. And then after the first quarter, we didn't hear from him, and they made the adjustments. People forget that Georgia team is they averaged 46.6 points per game against ranked opponents last year. I mean, they were incredible all season, and that includes the Tennessee game where they took their foot off the gas for an entire half of the game.
Yeah. And it rained. It rained too.
Yeah, I heard all your fans talk about that. That was something else. No, I think that Ohio State was a very good team, and I know what happened at Michigan. Yeah. I get all that, or at home against Michigan. But Ryan Day is one of the best, probably top 3 offensive minds in all of college football, up there with Sark and with Kiffin. And, he showed that. And especially when you have Stroud and you have all that kind of stuff. Yeah. That was just – I said before the season, I said I had Georgia losing to Ohio State in the national championship. And that was my prediction. I had Georgia winning the SEC still and all that kind of stuff. And it was pretty close. Obviously, it seemed like that was probably the national championship. Yeah. I just think that, with when you have all that talent, like Ryan Day is a great offensive mind, and he also had all the pieces in place that could have beaten that Georgia team. Yeah. But it also takes a Herculean effort to beat Kirby Smart in Georgia, and not a lot of people have done it. Actually, only one team has done it in the last 2 years. So
it's brought to you by Chris from Saturday Up North.
Yeah. Come on down to Sundays Up North. It's my new website.
We appreciate you, man.
Yeah, of course.
We give you a hard time, but you really are one of our favorites to talk to, so we love having you on. Tell the audience where to find you before you take off. All
right. My home address is 337. No, I'm kidding. It's Vern Funquist.
That's for you, Ollie.
Yeah. Shout out to Ollie, as always. Hope you're having a great week. And if you're not, I hope it only gets worse. But, no, So Vern Funquist on Twitter and Instagram. The podcast is the College Football Uncensored Podcast and all that good stuff. And like I always say every time I'm on here, I'm so happy and proud of you guys for all the great work you all have done and continued success, man. So cheers to that.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
All right, I told you. That was a good one, right? So next on the docket, friend of the show, Braden Gall. Love talking ball with Braden. One of the smartest guys out there when it comes to SEC football. So let's kick it over to our interview, Braden Gall, 440 Sports. Yeah, so we're here with Braden Gall, 440 Sports, Athlon Sports, and he's not been outside in about 6 weeks.
Apparently not. I sleep during the day. I work at night. Vampire here. Yes, that's what hosting Feinbaum will do for you.
Yeah, how was it? I thought you did a great job with that.
Oh, thank you. I thought you were wonderful as well. Anything else? Shane, you were great. I think we were all great. We were so good together. It was wonderful.
Yeah, but that's got to be a high honor. I mean, there's only a handful of people they would even consider for such a role, and you're there.
It is. I didn't mean to bring that up like that, but it is. It means a lot to me personally. I lost. So ESPN hired me before the pandemic, and then they basically, everybody who was a part-time or weekend or anything like that was not working during that period of time, and so hundreds of people were not working. And I told myself, and my wife, if they never came back to me and I never worked again for ESPN, I got my 1 year, I got my contract. I got to interview Coach O and Joe Burrow at the Heisman Trophy ceremony because I was doing ESPN radio on Saturday night for the Heisman.
Yeah.
And if I never once got to work there again, I was fine.
Yeah.
Totally comfortable with it. And now, having done Feinbaum, I don't know, a couple Christmases and holidays, it's only when he takes off. He doesn't take very many days off. Like, if you told me right now, ESPN called me tomorrow, I'm like, yeah, you're done. Like, you're part of the layoffs that happened, which I'm not expensive enough to be part of the layoffs. But if I was part of the layoffs, I'd have been like, hell yeah, dude. Like, I got to talk to Jim in Tuscaloosa. Jim hates me. Genuinely, Jim hates me. And, like,
that's how you know you're doing a good job, though.
I-Man calls in to defend me, and, like, AC in Bangladesh, my man. Like, it's just, like, I don't know. It's very surreal to be such a fan of his work and the show and to know what it means to people in the Southeast. And then to get to do it, and then people hate you for it because you're not Paul.
Let me ask you
which
this,
is totally
though,
understandable. So.
Because people give Hiv scholars, they give a lot of fans, a bad rap, but they're so great in my opinion because they are knowledgeable, because they know what the hell they're talking about. And if you miss
football,
they know
what they're talking about in football.
Well, and that's what we're talking about.
They don't know anything else.
If you mispronounce a guy's name or position, I mean, they're on your ass because they know it. Yeah. Is there anything in that time that maybe one of the callers came in and it made you kind of rethink an opinion, or maybe you learned something? I'm kind of curious about that.
About football, probably often. Because what I love about doing radio, and this goes back to, we're hanging out with you guys on this kind of platform. Podcast is a little bit more difficult, but live radio has been my whole career. Sirius XM, I worked for a long time on the college channel. And, like, having a conversation is always what's mattered to me. And sometimes that means I might be talking with you about something, and we're talking Missouri's schedule or defensive line, and all of a sudden, like, okay, I think about this. And a lot of the callers are that good on that show, even if they're a bunch of Looney Tunes. Like, they are the best sports fact checkers you could ever find. Yeah. And I would argue not just Feinbaum callers. Like, people that are dedicated to their channel, and especially on Sirius, where it's like the hockey channel, the golf channel, like the people who listen to those channels are diehards. And they're the best fact checkers in the world. They cannot do that on any other aspect of their lives.
Yeah.
Like, cannot do it. Incapable of acknowledging certain very, obvious realities. But if I get the height and weight wrong on the backup Alabama linebacker, they are going to call my ass on that.
Are you ever worried about that? Like, there's that bastard. You're just out in public, you run into him?
Oh, nobody recognizes me, which is great. But, like, and I think we've joked about this, but if you take 5 seconds out of your day to call my show or a show that I'm hosting, or to open up Twitter and tell me that my opinion sucks ass and I'm a dumbass, I'm like, I'm honored by that, man. Like, you took time out of your day to tell me that? Awesome. Yeah. And some of that's just living in radio world for 20 years.
Yeah.
And, like, it comes with the territory. If I ever we can cuss, right, on the show?
Oh, yeah.
Like, if my wife doesn't understand it because she's like a social media lurker. She doesn't like post anything ever.
Yeah.
But she gets on Instagram and like looks at stuff. I'm not on Instagram at all. Twitter's my drug of choice. But, like, if I ever want if I ever need to be told "fuck you," I could just open up the phone, open up Twitter, and I'm good to go. Jump on Paul. It won't be those words, but, like, I can just say something about Alabama having questions this year, and this is a more interesting season than Alabama. Auburn. I said this one a couple weeks ago. I think Auburn fans are genuinely more excited about their football team this year than Alabama fans are.
Yeah.
Alabama fans, it's layered and laced with, like, these questions underneath.
Yeah.
We're going to win the Natty. But, like, are we going to win the Natty? And Auburn fans are like, fucking Hugh Freeze, man. And you say that on the air, and Alabama fans are, what?
Yeah.
No, whatever, man. And it's like, great. Thank you for taking the time to tell me I'm an idiot. I'm honored to be here.
Absolutely.
I'm glad you went there because our buddy Stephen Lassen, great job. I mean, I don't think there's anyone better in terms of just being a college football encyclopedia. That's what I like to call him. But he told me that you influenced him in picking Alabama to win the West, and I think he's kind of regretting that. I don't know. I don't want to speak for him, but he did put that in me.
I like speaking for him all the time.
Well, are you staying by that? Alabama #1 in the West for you right
honestly, now? I need to. This is a terrible answer for sports talk because I'm supposed to have a take, and but I honestly still don't know. I'm 2 days in. We're taping this on Tuesday. Like, I'm 2 days into this.
Yeah.
And I've talked to dozens of people who I respect. Some people that are inside programs, some people that are outside programs, some people that are really good at covering this stuff, and I still am not sure. I think there's a great case for both of them. My issue is that if the schedule for Bama was last year, I would have no questions.
Yeah.
I think I would go LSU. But LSU having to go to Tuscaloosa, Tennessee on the road at Alabama. Alabama gets Texas at home. Like, they're a different team on the road. They struggled in all those games last year, but they get all the big games at home. Like, who's their toughest road game? Kentucky?
Yeah.
Mississippi State? Like, maybe they lose one of those. Maybe they lose.
A&M?
The one I would say that they lose is A&M because
Yeah.
A&M clearly gets up for that game. The problem for A&M is they don't get up for any other games. It's just the Alabama game that they get up for. There's a drug for that, I think. But I think they lose. I think Alabama loses to Texas A&M.
Yeah.
And they go 11-0 the rest of the year. And I don't know how much that the quarterback matters. I don't know how much Tommy Reese matters.
Right.
LSU's got a better version of both of those positions. Maybe a better offensive line. Maybe better star power in the defensive front seven with Mason Smith and Harold Perkins. But Alabama's pretty damn good too.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I just think the schedule sets up for Bama to rebound a little bit. And again, rebound in air quotes because they were still 2 plays away from being 12-0 last year. It's what's ironic about and Steven, last time I'm talking to you, big guy. What's ironic is that I was the one who thought Alabama and LSU should be like 5 and 6 outside of the playoff.
Right.
And Steven is largely responsible for the Athlon Sports Magazine rankings. I am sort of a consigliere who gets to help when he's really struggling with the decision, and I help out with that. I was torn on Alabama early. I'm still torn on Alabama, but I still think they're the top 2 roster in America. They have the greatest coach of all time. They get a bunch of big games at home. It's very hard. Like, I don't know where you guys fall on this, but honestly, I would probably have LSU and Alabama like 4 and 5 nationally. The question is, can losing to Georgia for either of them get them into the playoff?
Yeah.
Which would be top 4, and I don't know how that works. Like that, LSU's got a much tougher schedule. They're not as mature, 1 to 85, not personality, but like program. So I could see LSU dropping one. Ole Miss a tough game at Alabama. Florida State's going to be a real big challenge in week 1. I don't know where you guys fall, but like right now it's Bama by like a 51-49.
Yeah.
Bama, but I don't think either of them can make the playoff unless they can beat Georgia. And I'm not picking either one to beat Georgia in the SEC championship game.
Right.
I think that opens the path up for some other team that we're not talking about.
Let me ask you, a lot of great sources here. We've talked to a lot of great people. And is there anybody maybe that's losing stock in your mind? Is there any teams that maybe you feel like you were a little too high on?
That's a great question because everybody's so happy in the SEC, which should be terrifying for every coach and fan base. Because there's no way it's going to work out for everybody. There's too many good teams, too many losses. Arkansas, South Carolina, and Tennessee are the 3 that I've talked about on our show that be careful.
Yeah.
If expectations for all 3 of those are top 20, which Tennessee probably will be, Arkansas will be close, South Carolina will be just probably behind that. If the expectations for those 3 teams are to be 9 or 10 wins, I think they're going to be closer to 8 wins.
Yeah.
But nobody that's changed since being here. I haven't talked to anybody. I think South Carolina is getting the most, and this is, damn it. Because I actually really like
Why
Shane.
do you hate South Carolina?
He hates them.
I love Shane Beamer. I love their receiving core. I love the tight end. I think Rattler has his best season. They have such a hard schedule.
Right.
And there are so many 50-50 games on it. And if expectations are not to take another step from where they were, same with Tennessee, I think that's hard. I think Arkansas could get a game better because KJ's healthy and Dan Enos does the work with him to make him a more efficient passer, and they win a couple games, and all of a sudden they take a step forward.
Right.
But South Carolina, I think it's going to be hard for Tennessee and South Carolina to match last year's totals. And so if they take one game back, are fans okay with that? Do they understand that?
Right.
We already have our own bourbon bet. He's betting Tennessee 8. I think I said Tennessee 10.
I think it was 9.5, but I'm okay with whatever we decide now.
Okay. Well,
if you say 10, I say 8, that'll be fine. 9, we split the bet, right?
Right. I think that's what it was.
Fair,
I think that was. But that's a point you've been making all off season, that a lot of optimism all across the SEC. Again, we'll see how that lasts once losses start piling up potentially and things of that nature. But Do you think that is a product? And going back to your uncertainty, who's going to win the West? Everybody's got Georgia in the East, but aside from that, do you think that's a product of NIL and the transfer portal? Because I look at programs like Auburn right now. 5 years ago, if Hugh took that over, they'd be like, we're going to be good in a couple years, but our line of scrimmage is awful. We have no weapons. We don't have a quarterback.
Rebound quickly.
You can flip it. Kelly flipped it. They've got a secondary now. Heupel flipped it because of transfers. Shane Beamer, same thing, on and on and on. I think that's a product of the transfer portal and NIL.
I think it's a factor. I think it's also, and I know you guys have both talked about Kentucky and Missouri, right? Like you guys, throughout the course of the last few weeks, you guys are both kind of like, I kind of like Kentucky to be better. I kind of like Missouri to be better.
Right.
And that's the same. I think it's, number one, I think it's a function of just the year that we're in. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you just have crazy years. When you take Bryce Young, reigning Heisman Trophy winner, the greatest single quarterback season in Tennessee football history, in Hendon Hooker, also an NFL draft pick. Will Levis. He's a first-round grade and probably a 10-year starting quarterback in the NFL. Had one of the best seasons for Kentucky 2 years ago, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
But pretty good player. For everybody that hates him, pretty good player. He's gone. Two-time defending national champ and starting quarterback. He's gone. Like, you take that kind of star power off the quarterbacks. And 12 different offensive coordinators.
Yeah.
12 different offensive coordinators. The only two that return are LSU and Vanderbilt with their starting quarterback. Mm-hmm. So maybe it's not 12 different. I should say 12 different coordinator combinations.
Right.
I mean, Josh Heupel lost his coordinator, but does that really count? Probably not. So I think it's – and each one of those teams you mentioned, it's different. They rebounded for different reasons. Lane Kiffin's doing it because he's going into the portal, to your point. I think that's how they go from a 10-2 season with Matt Corral and a historically great team, and they stay relevant is because of the portal and because of NIL. I think that's for real. Auburn's NIL is off the charts productive because of Hugh Freeze. Not strangely, didn't work that well when Brian Harsin was the coach. So that's all lined up, right? And so that's why they're excited. Also, just a new coach excitement. Florida's taking a lot longer because they have to build out all this infrastructure, but I think it's showing progress finally on the recruiting trail. South Carolina does it with like really good. South Carolina fans, listen up. They've done it with like elite game management. Like Shane Beamer is great on game day. Like what they do as a staff and as a team is they manage the game better than anybody else. Like they're playing. Like more often than not, they're making the right call, right fourth down, great special teams. It's modern Beamer ball. And he's maximizing talent that, frankly, is not comparable to some of the teams. Brian Kelly bounced back at LSU because recruiting at LSU is not a problem. And Brian Kelly's a Hall of Famer. Josh Heupel, because his offensive system has a high floor, right? Like, and he hit with his quarterback transfer in Hendon Hooker. So it's kind of different reasons for everybody, which, again, to me, covering this league long enough, you guys have been around long enough, somebody's going to be pissed at the end of the year. I don't know if that's Eli Drinkwitz. I don't know if that's Sam Pittman. I don't know if that's, Zach Arnett. I don't know who's going to be upset, but like 3 or 4 fan bases are not going to achieve because there's too many good games. And I don't know who it is right now. I feel pretty comfortable with Alabama, LSU. You
just got me thinking. I have not thought of this yet because I'm so high on this team this year, and I think you are fairly too. Kentucky. What happens if the bottom falls out? And that'd be 2 years in a row. Like, let's say they lose to Vandy 2 years in a row. Do we start to get to a hot seat?
No, but because there's questions about Mitch Barnhart and how he is he the right athletic director for the future of Kentucky football. He has done extraordinary things for the program, but I think the fans are kind of like, and for all the programs like baseball, softball, basketball, he and Calipari don't talk at all. But he's done so much. The question is he the right guy for the next generation of Kentucky sports? I say all that to say expectations have been risen. Mark Stoops is kind of the greatest football coach in Kentucky history, not named Bear Bryant, I guess. I think fans now, to your point, are expecting 7, 8, 9 wins more often, and that's pressure. But I think they also kind of understand that Mitch Barnhart has kept him from using NIL, finally letting him sell beer for crying out loud, like in the stadium. But like, there's been some self-limitations on Kentucky. I think Mark Stoops' formula for success at Kentucky is perfect, which is take the biggest players from Kentucky, take the second-tier players from Ohio, take the third-tier players from Florida and Georgia and Texas. and I'm going to put them all together, develop them like crazy, hire great coordinators other than last year, hire great coordinators, and really develop these guys and buy into the culture from the beginning. And if the NIL can actually kick in for them, that's where they could take some steps. I wouldn't say hot seat, no. If they're 4-8, sure. Nobody can go 4-8 in this league other than Vanderbilt and not be on the hot seat. But
what about best case scenario? I mean, I know they got Alabama, but let's just say everything comes together with these guys. What do you think best case scenario Kentucky walks away with?
I mean, they've had 2 10-win seasons in the last few years. Devin Leary is one of the most underrated players in this conference because nobody in the SEC watches the ACC, and that's fair. It's kind of boring. But Devin Leary's not. Liam Cohen is not. Look at the yards per play, the efficiency metrics for Kentucky's offense in 2021 versus every other year that Kentucky has had a football team under Mark Stoops, and there's one offense that was better than everyone else, and it was Levis and Cohen. I think the offensive line will be better, can't be worse. One of the best receiving corps in school history. I think people are totally sleeping on Ray Davis. I think the defensive line they're all like monsters, like huge creatures that Mark Stoops is going to develop. They get, Florida and Tennessee at home?
Yeah.
There's some things that are lining up for Kentucky. I really like Kentucky. And everybody here in Nashville seems to like them too, which, again, gives me pause. But everyone's talking up Kentucky, and I thought I was going to come in with Kentucky as like my sleeper team, and I think everybody's kind of with us. I know you guys are both there too, so we better be careful.
Yeah. What's your hottest of hot takes here at Media Days?
Georgia doesn't win the national championship?
Yeah.
Is that a hot take?
No, I mean, well, I guess it is.
I don't know. Is it? I mean, they're clearly number 1 in the country.
Right.
Right?
Do you think okay, so they don't make a national championship. Do you think it's because they lose games during the season, or they drop in the college football playoffs?
I think they lose one in the playoff.
Okay.
Probably. And again, that's why it's not really a hot take. Like, I think one team won't win the national championship. Like,
it's always smarter to go with the field.
It's not that hot of a take, but they are so clearly number 1.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Questions at quarterback for Alabama, questions at Ohio State quarterback. Michigan's roster is never going to be good enough to beat them head to head. USC's defense, Pac-12 defenses in general, Texas just a giant question mark across the board, but could be very good. Could also be Texas. So it's just LSU's the one the team that I think is there's 2 teams that I think are really sneaky that I think could beat them. One I think is prepared to do it now if they get there, and I think the other one is quarterback dependent, and that is Florida State. I think it absolutely beat them in a head-to-head one-game situation. Great pass rush, NFL defensive line, elite quarterback play, weapons all over the place, best offensive line Florida State's had in a long time. I think in a one-game situation, could you get them into an Ohio State-Georgia type game? I think Florida State could do that. I think USC could do that. The one to keep an eye on, though, and this is a team nobody's really talking about, to come out of the Big Ten and play in the playoff is Penn State. My question is the coach.
Yeah.
James Franklin cannot manage the end of a football game. Opposite of Shane Beamer. Shane Beamer knows how to do everything right at the end of a game. James Franklin cannot. But they have an elite offensive line. They have an elite defensive line, and they got probably the number 1 pick in the draft 2 years from now in Drew Aller at quarterback. If he
He's that good, huh?
If he hits, heard it here first. Number 1 pick in the draft, two drafts from now. He's a rising sophomore.
Okay.
So not the Caleb Williams draft, but the draft after that. I think if he is as good as his pedigree says, we're talking 6'5", 240 pounds. Like, he's huge.
Yeah.
Big arm. If he hits, they have everything else.
Yeah.
Great running game, great defense, great offensive line, like dudes, first-round picks.
Right.
And so I think there's a few teams that could get them in a one-game situation in the playoff. But it doesn't feel like – I think the hot take would be they lose a regular season game and then lose in the playoffs.
Okay.
I think that's the hot take, and I think somebody could get them this year in the regular season, but like –
Anybody not Tennessee?
If all the games were on the road, I would probably feel differently. Kentucky's a good team, Ole Miss is a good team, South Carolina's a good team, but they're all in Athens.
Right.
Tennessee's might be the best team they play on the schedule on the road. I just think they're going to be ready for that. And I do have questions about Heupel's system against elite athletes because they are going to take away the run game.
Yeah.
Georgia is going to stop you from running the football, and then it's on the rest of the team to do it. They could do it. They could figure it out. And we'll see. Carson Beck hasn't ever started a game.
Right.
there's a lot more questions about this team today than there were last year. There's a lot more noise and distraction about this team than this time last year. Kirby played the disrespect card last year. I thought it was actually okay and smart. They weren't picked number one. They weren't picked to win the SEC. They had their star quarterback back. I mean, like I can understand it. This year, there's no disrespect.
Right.
They are clear-cut number one across the board, but there are more questions.
Right.
So I think Georgia loses 2 games this year. That's about as hot take as I think I can get.
That's bold, brother. Remember,
it.
that's Braden Gall saying that, not us. Tell the folks,
For the record, that picking him number one in the country to win the SEC. Just on the record.
Tell the folks, where can they find you?
At Braden Gall on Twitter is the primary place there. 440 Sports is our company in Nashville. You can Athlon Sports if you want to cover all 133 teams. Fringe Element Podcast for now. That's the name. Of course, you can get us there all over the YouTube page as well, and on the podcast feed. So we got some fun, exciting stuff coming for you guys. So we're looking forward to the build up to the season. I truly believe this is one of the most interesting SEC football seasons I can ever remember because of all the things we just talked about. So many good teams, so many questions at quarterback, Georgia three-peat, questions about Bama, LSU, like Texas and Oklahoma are coming in next year, expansions next year. Like it's genuinely an awesome season. I can't wait, and I'm glad it's here. So.
Oh, there's one other thing. I apologize. I meant to ask you. When I think of Nashville sports, I think of Braden Gall, 440 Sports.
Oh, thank you.
You cover it better than anybody. This event, being in Nashville, I mean, I feel like so far, I know there's construction. Nobody cares about that. But I feel
all the construction analogies, I'm getting tired of them.
I feel like they knocked it out of the park here. And what's your thoughts? Did you ever think that Nashville would get the media days? And if this stadium is as grand as it looks like they're going to build, do you think we eventually get an SEC championship right down the street?
No SEC championship. And I feel pretty comfortable saying that. I think yes to a lot of other things. Now, first of all, not surprised at all it's here. They've tried to steal, and I know the folks that work in the Nashville Sports Authority pretty well that have tried to take the SEC baseball tournament multiple times, and Hoover, I think it's more important than Hoover. It's way more important to Hoover than it is to Nashville. So I'm glad it's in Hoover. I think it's charming there, and I think it belongs there. But they've been trying to steal every single SEC event for a decade. And they've come pretty close. They got basketball tournament a bunch of times, women's basketball tournament. I think what I would guess, and I think the event here is great. Fans don't care about this. It's way better than Atlanta because of how it's so easy for us to manage, I think. But, again, nobody cares about the media. I think when the stadium is built, $2 billion Titan Stadium, I have been told pretty specifically that before the stadium is built that we are on the line for a college football playoff game, weather-wise, which this person was telling me this to basically say when the dome is built, you are guaranteed a college football playoff game.
Yeah.
I think what comes with that is some sort of SEC kickoff classic, the way Tennessee and Virginia are playing this year at Nissan Stadium. I could see it being very similar to what they do in Arlington, what they do in Charlotte, and what they do in Atlanta. I could see it. I would love for it to be an SEC Big Ten challenge. Like, I think that would be awesome to have that game every year in Nashville, which there's plenty of good, drivable Big Ten schools from Nashville, actually. So I think it'd be a great event. So Sankey was pretty clear on Monday that they're re-upping their contract with Atlanta. Mm-hmm. They're not going to move it, I don't think. But I think there's a door for a lot of other stuff. College football playoff game, yes, absolutely. National championship game will be here. The Music City Bowl is going to be the host of those two. At some point, Super Bowl's coming, Final Four's coming, WrestleMania's coming, everything's coming. Like, they're all coming to the stadium. The key is going to be what happens early in the season. Yeah. I think that's what's going to be fun. Is we could have a big, like, can you imagine now this wouldn't work in Nashville. But can you imagine like Texas A&M week 1 every year? Like, give me a break with that, dude. Like, you can make a fortune off that game. Like, just Arlington is better, but
I think what he's trying to say is Tennessee is going to start the season and end the season in Nashville. National championship game. You heard it here first, Braden Gall.
In 2023, I love that.
Hates South Carolina, loves Tennessee, love having this guy on.
All right, that's perfect. All right, so thanks again, Braden, for joining the show. Now it's time to go into the deep dive on these teams from SEC Media Days. And we got to start with the back-to-back defending national champion Georgia Bulldogs, favored to make it 3-for-3. As crazy as that is, But obviously complacency. That is basically all you can attack Georgia on. And you can't even attack them on it, but you can question. With so much success, with so many guys going to the NFL. But hell, same thing could be said last year. Even more, I think, last year off to the NFL than off of this year's roster. So that's one of the things that Kirby is referenced down there at Media Days. And I love this answer. They want people that love football and embrace their role. Let's kick it over to Kirby.
Coach Smart, your team back-to-back national champions. You talked about complacency and the challenge with complacency. Your team coming into this year, how do you go ahead and address all of those issues internally and block out the external factors?
Well, we address them by the people we bring in our organization. I think you start by developing good people and bringing good people in. I just talked about it on the main floor, but we look for two characteristics: people that love football and people that embrace a selfless role. Once you do that, they don't have complacency because they have the right hardwiring. So, people that worry about outcomes like, oh gosh, my ego, why am I not getting the ball? Or like, oh man, we lost the game. Complacency sets in on those people because when they hit a milestone, they don't know how to respond to it. So we want people that are intrinsically motivated. It means they come from inside out and they want to be great regardless of that. Now, do we have all players like that? No. We're trying to move our needle to get the majority that way so that we can stomp out that complacency. And we just want to be as dominant and as good as we can be, and that starts with competing against each other.
Now, I really wanted to play that clip because it's a little coach speakish. Honestly, I think that's fair to say. But from what we saw from them on the field last year, everything he just said is 100% accurate. I mean, they were not preseason number one last year. Alabama was. They were not the favorite in the SEC. Alabama was. So, hell, they got better. They got better despite maybe the best defense we've ever seen in college football. A lot of those guys off to the NFL. Can they do it again? They sure as hell can. Thanks in large part to a schedule that looks easy. But I love this response from Kirby. Georgia's schedule, and this is not him speaking, this is me. Georgia's schedule looks easy because there's nobody in the country that can man up with them. So, I mean, the schedule could be Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan. They're still going to be favored in all these damn games. So, yeah, the schedule looks a little bit easier, but it's because they're Georgia. It's because, obviously, that Oklahoma game had to be taken off by the SEC, not Georgia. Still would have loved to see that game played either way. But let's kick it over to Kirby talking how, quote-unquote, easy this schedule is.
What do you have to say to people who maybe say that Georgia's schedule is a cakewalk?
And come play it. I mean, I'd love to invite any team in the country who wants to play in the SEC. Come right ahead. And I don't get into comparisons year to year, but I'm a big believer in opening with a great game, a great kickoff game. We've done that repeatedly. We've scheduled that out. I think we got UCLA, Ohio State, FSU, Louisville, all in coming years. Clemson next year. We had Oregon, and we had Clemson before that. So a lot of things I can control. I don't control the narrative that people create outside of our building.
Now, I did want to throw this out there, too, because this is, in fairness, Kirby mentions some of the games they have played. They typically play a really tough non-conference game right out the gate. Look at some of the games they got upcoming in 2024. They play Clemson in Atlanta. 2025, they go to UCLA. 26, UCLA comes to Athens, and they go to Louisville. 27, at Florida State and Louisville at home. 28, Florida State comes to Athens. At Clemson in 29, and in 30, oh, look at this. Maybe a 64-team playoff in 2030, I don't know. But Clemson and Ohio State on the non-conference. And, oh, yeah, I mean, I know it's a joke because their program's a joke, but Georgia Tech also on the schedule annually. So, and it ain't Georgia's fault that Georgia Tech sucks. So, it is what it is. But to Kirby's point, they are not afraid of the competition. It just so happens that this year's schedule looks weak as hell because, A, Georgia's so great, and Oklahoma, which Georgia scheduled, is not on the schedule this year, thanks to the SEC. But now let's kick it over to, this is one of our first interviews at Media Days. This is a guy we look forward to more than anybody. Oh, Rusty Mansell, Dogs HQ, part of the On3 Network. Let's kick it over to our good friend, Rusty Mansell. The whole reason we come down to SEC Media Days, talk to Rusty Mansell.
One and done, and
We're
you're good.
packing up after this.
After this, we're hitting Tootsies. It's on. Cousin Shane, he's been ready to rock and roll.
How you doing, Rusty?
Good, man. Thank y'all for having me. First off, I want to say thank you. I mean, I've done a lot in 13 years, but I'm telling you, being on your podcast and kind of telling my story, which really, I don't know the intention that day, but we kind of just got talking. An hour later, it was over with. But I can't tell you how many people reached out to me and was like, "Dang, that was cool." I listened to the whole hour. I was like, "Well, good, you know." And I appreciate it, man. It was awesome.
Yeah.
And then you hooked me up on Feinbaum. I was telling you guys a story. I'm driving down the road and my phone blows up. I'm like, "What is going on?" They're like, "Dude, they're talking about you on Feinbaum." I was like, I either got my 50-year scholarship back or something's not good, but I appreciate the kind words, man.
Well,
Thank
I'm just
you so
trying
much.
to repay for everything you've done. You've been one of the best to me.
I appreciate it.
You know,
Awesome.
you got to pay it forward, you know?
I feel like we're just, you know, your vibe and y'all's vibe, just a couple of dudes just talking ball, man. You know, that's kind of me. People ask me things. I'm like, look, there's a million people that can do this. We're just like being in a barbershop, man, talking ball.
Yep.
That's right.
So
I just like the recruiting side of it. Just listen. I would love
crazy.
to be a fly on the wall. Just
crazy. The
relive some of them
Reuben
stories.
Foster story. I
that
got
was
so
the
many
best.
texts about that. So I was thinking I'm going to get a text from Reuben at some point going, damn, man, bust me out. But
Is there any on your drive home you're like, man, I should have told them? Here's your shot right now.
Not, you know, probably not really. I mean, I told you, people ask me if I'm ever going to write a book. Maybe I will one day, and I'll get some in there. But I've got a ton, man. There's been some crazy, you know, stories. But to me, it's the success stories, you know, the kids I've covered. And, you know, Eric Stokes, who was a last-minute Georgia flip that morning. I remember Georgia fans were like, man, what are we doing, taking this guy, you know? And, you know, 3 years later, this dude was a first-round draft pick. You know what I mean? And that's fun to watch those kind and those kids. So I'm sure I'll remember one day, but I'll save it for the next time we're on. I'll see if I can remember. I'll make some notes like save that for that SEC podcast.
What's an underrated storyline for Georgia this year? Because it was this time last year. I had my quarterback rankings. You said, "Boy, you missed on Stetson." You were dead right. What's something maybe everybody's missing on Georgia right now?
You know, for me, I think Georgia is going to be better defensively. And the reason I say that is because they're going to be able to have more pass rush. If you think about the end of last year when they lost Nolan Smith in that Florida game, I kept thinking this Tennessee game, I don't know how they're going to create pressure because Nolan Smith was out. And he was kind of their dude there.
Yep.
But ultimately, Georgia kind of changed their philosophy and used guys like Smile Munden and them. They were bringing different pressures. So I think that Georgia this year, Marvin Jones Jr., who was a 5-star prospect, you know, 2 years ago, he had a torn labrum last year, so he was on a pitch count at the end of the year. Then you got Michael Williams, who came on late in the year. He was a 5-star. Many thought could have been the number 1 player in the country. There wasn't a quarterback that year, so they'll have Michael, they'll have Marvin Jones Jr., and a guy, I'll give you a name right now. It might not be the first of the year, but by the time Georgia gets into that, what I think is that second half of the season, the bye week, then Florida, then you go to Knoxville, all those games. Damon Wilson, who was a 5-star outside linebacker from Venice, Florida last year. Georgia went head-to-head with Ohio State. So I think Georgia has guys, but I think they're going to be able to create more pressure. Now, they don't have a Jalen Carter. They don't. You're not going to replace what he could do by himself. But I do think as a group and a whole, what they like to do and when they've been successful, even when Kirby Smart was in Alabama, and some of those defenses he ran there, what they've been successful on is being able to have that guy on the edge, that Lorenzo Carter, those types of guys, and that allows everybody else to be more athletic. So they had to get a little more creative last year, I felt like, but defensively, people are not really saying a whole lot about them that I've seen so far.
What about on the offense side? Is there any guys that you're maybe not a household name yet, but you're thinking at the end of the season will be?
You know, they got a lot of experienced guys. The one guy, I think if you follow Georgia, Arian Smith, he might be the fastest player in the country. I mean, he's a 10-200 guy, but he's been banged up. He caught a ball early in that Tennessee game last year. He caught that wide open bust coverage against Ohio State. But he's been that guy because he's been banged up. He's just really a straight vertical line guy, but he's got a little he's a real twitchy kid. So if they can keep him healthy, I think with all the attention on Lab McConkey and everybody.
Right.
Obviously, when you facing Brock Bowers, the guy you got to cover as well. I think Arians enter Dominic Lovett. Dominic Lovett.
Yeah.
He got into Georgia pretty good last year. They had a great scouting report on him. I can tell you that. All they had to do was turn on one tape, and if he doesn't get hurt, man, who knows what's going on in that game? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you look at him, but I think Arian Smith is a guy that could be like, dang, Georgia's adding this guy, but he's got to stay healthy.
Do you think it's fair to say that they have completely flipped that Alabama? Because it used to be, I really think Alabama was in Georgia's head. Right now, I think Georgia is in Alabama's head, and specifically Nick Saban, because I know most expect Georgia to win the East, or obviously the East, the SEC, and the favorite to win it all. They should be. But if they don't get it done, we know the next 5-10 years, as long as Kirby's there, they're going to be in contention. You cannot say the same about Alabama. They've got 1 or 2 more years, I think. Well, maybe more, but
I said it 4 years ago.
Yeah,
Saban's got one. Yeah,
the pressure is on, though, for Alabama to catch up now.
I think I can answer it in this way, and I don't want to answer for Alabama, but I'll answer for Georgia. My thought is they're a very confident team. Yeah. They enter every game, no matter who's on that sideline, going, we can beat them now, because you've beat Alabama, you beat Ohio State. You've won these big games, when you found ways to win games like that. So I think, you look at that and go, this Georgia roster from these older kids, they've won a lot of football games. And you can go all the way back to you guys got Tennessee background. So, when you go back to the Peyton Manning year that they didn't win it, but they brought back a lot of kids on that team next year that won a lot of games. Yeah. You know what I mean? And T. Martin comes in and they win those games. So they had to get over the Florida hump. Georgia kind of had to get over that Alabama hump. So I think the confidence there is we can play with anybody, and every single week we expect to win. And I'll be honest, it's a great question. I don't know that internally every time they stepped on the field, Alabama, they probably felt that way, like, hey, we may not be able to beat these guys. You kind of finally get over that hump once. It'd be interesting. It's kind of a shame they didn't play last year, you know what I mean? Yeah. But next year, regardless, 2024, Georgia's going to go to Tuscaloosa. And that's going to be a totally different team now. As we dig into Georgia, this offensive line, they're going to lose 4 starters minimum probably. Brock Bowers, who's maybe the best tight end in the last 20 years. So it's going to be a different set of players going over there next year as we look forward. But I think to answer that question, I just think that Georgia's a really confident team. Well, they expect to win them all.
I'm already on record. If Georgia wins again and they go to Tuscaloosa and beat Nick Saban, he may pull a Spurrier and just say, I'm done.
You know what, man? My good buddy Tim Watts, who runs our Alabama, I told him about 5 years ago, I said, dude, Saban's got about 1 left. So every year he says to me, "Tech, you still think he's got 1 left?" I'm like, no, Tim. I was wrong, dude. So
how do you think he does leave? I mean, do you think he goes out like he's waiting for that final championship opportunity, or do you feel like he lets everyone know this is his final season?
Man, I tell you what, I don't know what makes him stop, because everybody that I don't know him at all personally.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people that know him, and this guy is wired to be a football coach.
Yeah.
He's not going to – he don't have that own Golden Pond dream. Like, he ain't up there in the canoe with Miss Terry fishing. You know what I mean? Like, he's got to have this competitive drive to him. So, I'll be honest with you, man, I don't know how. People's like, well, if he wins one, he might walk off. Very well could. But if he loses another game, I don't know that Nick Saban is going to sit there and say, that's going to be my last – that's going to be my last memory. Like, this dude's got it in him, and it's incredible, like, health-wise. You look at him. Like, I turned 50 this week. I'm like, damn, you look old, dude. Like, you look rough. You know what I mean? You look at Nick Saban, and you're like, this guy's fresh, So
I saw him out there stretching with the guys. I'm like, I don't even know if I'm not going to get on the ground.
No,
I'll never get up.
No. But he's good for college football. Certainly, if he does walk away, he's going to be involved somehow, ESPN or somebody. He'd be crazy not to have him there. So it's a great question. I keep saying I quit saying it. Like, this is it for him. You just don't know.
Yeah.
What's the biggest challenge for Georgia this year? Do you think it is? They all say it's easier to get to the mountaintop than it is to stay there.
Yeah.
We're hearing all the stuff about the schedule.
Sure.
They should kill everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, that's got to seep into the locker room at some point.
That's complacency. How does Kirby handle that? They have those, internal leadership deals and all that kind of stuff. I think getting Cedric – he'll be here tomorrow. I don't know if you guys will get a chance to talk to him, but Cedric Van Pran is one of the most impressive kids you'll ever meet. Like, he is super sharp. And getting him to come back this year because you don't really want to replace a quarterback and a center. You know what I mean? So those two, I mean, he makes the calls for protections, and with Carson Beck who I think is going to be the guy, not having a ton of obviously like real experience. I think complacency, what goes in the locker room, because I don't care who you are, privately, you got a really good team, and everybody tells you how good you are. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Kirby Smart can go in there and all that 7-5 stuff. Nolan Smith's uncle, he ain't coming in the locker room this year going, they hate y'all. Nobody believes in y'all. Everybody's like, who? Like, I covered this team. Nobody tell y'all going 7-5 if that's what you want to hear. You know what I mean? So it's crazy. Players on the sideline now, championship again, saying that y'all saw we were going to be 7-5. No, nobody in the world, in the free world, say y'all going to be 7-5.
Did Kirby? Did he say anything about live streaming or recording in the studio? Is there an unwritten rule now?
No, man. I tell you that whole deal. When I saw Nolan interviewed, Nolan said, "I may have made that up. I'm not going to get guilty." I loved it. I've known Nolan for a long time, so I thought that was great to hear him say that.
Is there any game on the schedule that you circle? I mean, obviously everyone's looking at Tennessee, but
that's it. That's not the only one for me, but I think Tate Ratledge would agree with me walking into Neyland. Yeah. I don't get Tate in trouble, but you walk into that place, and I don't care if Tennessee is just say they're 7-3.
Right.
They're going to get Tennessee's best, and they're going to get Tennessee's fan base the best because they know what Georgia fan base rose up last year. That place was crazy loud. Neyland's going to be rocking and rolling. So, I think when you look at that game, it's hard not to look down there and see, what's going to be at stake at that point. I've kind of been in a little bit of a bubble this summer and hadn't really read a ton on everybody. I'm kind of seeing people think like South Carolina is that trendy kind of pick, and they got a quarterback coming back, and they finished a year high. But I'm kind of thinking Tennessee's going to be better than people are kind of looking at because I think it's the system, and what does Joe Milton do? You know what I mean? Yeah. He's such a mature man. You know what I mean? He's got this huge arm, and can they replace these wide receivers? And some of those things will be the questions for them. But I just think that Georgia going into that game, and listen, South Carolina always has played Georgia tough for whatever reason. Florida, I think, they got quarterback questions. What will happen there? But when you look at Tennessee and you go to Neyland, and that place is going to be, you talking about unhinged? Now, that Vol Navy's going to roll up about Tuesday. They're going to be deep for that game. So
yeah, we had your colleague Grant Firking on here.
Yeah.
He fired up Shane about what Josh Heupel and the Vols are going to do this year.
Well, they chest bump right here.
Yeah.
So, I tell you what, man, you talking about a stud, Grant. I just got a chance to meet him the last couple of months. You know what I mean? I kind of read his story, but, dude, we had that NIL event here on 3. Like, he was really the point man. You know what I mean? Like, there was questions going on. They were going to him, and I thought, man, this kid's sharp. And then the more time I spent around him, so I told Shannon, I said, I don't know how long we're going to have that guy. You better enjoy it.
Dude,
you better
he's dialed in.
He's sharp.
And motivating. I was like, man, what am I doing with my life?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Let me tell you something. Don't follow him on Instagram. It'll crush your soul. Now, this dude's like, he's in like Cape Cod on weekend, the Bahamas the next. I'm like, dude, I just went to PCB for 4 days. Pineapple Willie's. I thought I was doing something, So, but Grant's sharp, and he's a very, very big piece of our puzzle. And Shannon, I'll tell you, Shannon, I've talked about it a million times, but the one thing that Shannon I thought's had a great eye, he's basically the one that found Josh Pate. You know what I mean? And when you come across Grant and you give him that much kind of power and authority and freedom to do, to become who you are, and I think Grant's going to be – that's going to be a hell of a bet for me because I'm going to be dealing with Grant, Austin Price. I mean, this Georgia-Tennessee game this year is going to be – I don't know what's going to be on the line, man. I'm about to wear like a Peyton Manning jersey for like a month straight or something if they lose that one. So we'll have some fun with Hubs and those guys. So really glad they all of us are on 3 together.
Yeah, and one other, don't overlook Kentucky. Kentucky, for whatever reason, plays Georgia tough. They're very physical.
Always.
I like what they have at quarterback. They bring back Coleman, OC. I know that game's in Athens, but still, they even play Georgia tough down there.
Dude, Missouri had Georgia on the ropes last year.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's not – I always caution Georgia fans, like, hey, listen now. it's a gauntlet every week. You know what I mean? And I've done some interviews here, and it's really a shame. I don't understand the thought process of why Georgia's not playing Oklahoma this year.
Yeah.
You didn't get them in 24. Might as well just let them play this year, you know. But how great would it have been if, listen to this now, if it had been Georgia at Oklahoma and Texas at Bama week 2.
Oh, yeah.
You're talking about not getting nothing done on a Saturday. I mean, it would have been over that week. So,
and I think that's really helped Georgia the last couple of years, opening against Clemson, opening against Oregon, keeping that team locked in.
I guarantee you if Kirby Smart sat in this chair right now and you ask him if he had a chance to play Oklahoma or Middle Tennessee or Ball State first game, he'd take Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Because it keeps the focus. You know what I mean? Like, Georgia's not fighting to play those games just for exposure. He understands what it does for the summertime. Like, you got to be prepared. His first game he ever did was that kickoff against North Carolina.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then they scheduled all these deals, and then you know, obviously you do this 4 or 5 years in advance.
Right.
But then the season kind of starts. The SEC is expanded, so it's kind of taken out of his hands. But Georgia opens for Clemson next year and Mercedes-Benz.
Dude, we're talking about a soft schedule this year. That changes next year.
There was nobody. You knew it was bad when the Tennessee and Alabama fans were going, dang, man, I feel bad for y'all. That's a rough one. That's a rough schedule, man. And a sneaky game, you know, you go to Ole Miss.
Yeah.
You know, Lane Kiffin can dial up on you in a heartbeat. They play this year. Georgia plays Ole Miss
this year. That's my trap game right there.
Yeah.
Ole Miss.
Yeah. I mean, Lane Kiffin is hard to deal with in a one-game scenario because, I mean, Duke can call plays now. And if they get their quarterbacks rolling, that type of thing. So there's some games with Georgia that I think is going to make them a little bit tight as a fan base. But certainly this team is very capable of winning a national championship. Now, it's a lot of quarterback play. Carson Beck, you know, I've said it all week.
Any surprise he's not here? Or
no,
really,
because
they haven't ended it?
Really, truthfully, if you think about the respect of a because he's not quote unquote named the starter yet.
Right.
I mean, they know this. That's probably going to be the guy they're going to roll with. But to me, to walk up here and you got to carry some weight in the locker room.
Yeah.
So Cedric Van Pran, Kamari Lassiter, and Brock Bowers.
Yeah.
Brock Bowers would be good because we had him at the national championship, and he's kind of a man of few words. You know what I mean? But I told Georgia fans this week, you better enjoy 19 because these don't come around. Like this dude is really damn good. They don't come around often like this.
Anything at this event that you're hoping to learn from Georgia?
I'm interested in, just like early on because, you know, sounds like there were some injuries the last week of spring practice with Smile Munden, who I think is one of the best linebackers around. And then Branson Robinson, who was another highly rated running back. You know, if you look at Georgia right now, the wide receiver spot, I feel like they're loaded.
Right.
The O-line, they're loaded. The tight end room is stupid loaded. Running back is where you could, because people ask about Mike Bobo. Mike Bobo, this is a different skill set, what they're bringing in. This is not, you know, Todd Gurley, Keith Marshall, and wait, you got two freshmen, Nick Chubb and Sonny Michel waiting.
Right.
You know what I mean? This is Kendall Milton, who's been banged up his whole career, got hurt again in the spring. Branson Robinson, who's banged up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you lose Kenny McIntosh. So really, you know, Mike Bobo, I personally think they're going to have to turn it loose, you know, for a while and kind of, you know, find out who's Dejon Edwards going to be that guy. Is Kendall Milton going to be? Andrew Paul's coming in off of an ACL last year. So there's some questions at running back for sure. It's not your typical, when people think Mike Bobo, it's not that team that they had with what all those years he had. Let's get downhill and power out, run the ball, tall sweep. That's kind of that those days are over. They're not built like that anymore either.
Right.
So running back's kind of a weird deal. We all grew up if you had a stud running back, it was on. But but now the game is so fast and it's played outside on the edge. You know what I mean? Jalen Height and those guys are.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You got to have the difference makers on the outside.
A little bit more of a committee too. It's the old 3 down back. You just don't see them too much.
No,
anymore.
the kids want to leave college with less carries.
Yeah.
The first group of kids that I covered that were like, hey, I want to go with you because I want less carries was Nick Chubb and Sonny Michel.
Yeah.
Like, I want to be fresh as I can when I get there. If we get to the NFL, so that's kind of the deal now. Everybody, like, Georgia's trying to take 3 running backs in this class.
Yeah.
You know, 10 years ago, I'd be like, what are they thinking? You know what I mean? But now everybody's like, no, let's do it by committee.
It's all about getting to that second contract.
If you can get there. Nick, you know, Saquon Barkley's in that deal right now where he's franchise or not. Nick did sign a deal, I think, 2 years ago because he was a second rounder, so he had a little more freedom. on his deal, but I think Nick will probably wind up getting a pretty good. The day Todd Gurley that was the last big contract you probably ever see. But he got hurt, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know the running backs.
Too.
Oh man, I'd be interested.
Sorry,
Steel dagger, wasn't it? Steel dagger. But I think when you look at that, what Saquon does this year, if they franchise him, if they give him 5 years, because I hadn't seen one. I mean, look at Zeke at the Cowboys.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been pretty downhill since he got paid.
Absolutely.
So Nick Chubb.
They're afraid. Jacobs is another one. You know,
Yeah.
he's talking about holding out.
Nick Chubb is wired different. You know, he's not trying to get $100 million, but
yeah.
I mean, he's the second highest NFL career average, I think, per carry, 5.2 yards. Just working out the high school the other day, just every day getting ready.
What's he squatting these days?
They basically cut him off. Yeah. So the other day they have in his hometown, Cedartown, they have one of the best. He's a wheelchair athlete.
Yeah.
This guy does all the distance, and he's like one of the top in the world. So he brings this a wheelchair race to his hometown. And from what I read, Nick Chubb was not invited. He was not asked to come. Nick Chubb showed up to meet everybody at the finish line.
Wow.
Just unannounced.
Oh, that's cool.
You talking about like different?
Yeah.
I mean, that guy, that's just the way he is.
Yeah.
And I asked him the other day when I saw him, I said, dude, I saw on Facebook that you just showed up and played pickleball in town. He was like, yeah, I just rolled up the court. I was like, well, who are you playing with? He's like, I don't know, some local kids. and like the kid's dad was like, hey, they picked him up. Like, Nick Chubb just played pickleball with us. And Dad was like, what? No, he didn't. They took a picture, he just rolled up to the old city courts and played some pickleball. He loves it. Loves pickleball. So
he's a pickleballer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I'm proud of what he's been going on.
Baby steps.
But right now, I'm not sure he wants to play pickleball with Nick. You know what I mean?
No, not at all.
You got to think. Last question for Rusty.
Oh, man. No, I just appreciate you coming on.
It's awesome, man.
If you ever get one of them on 3 polos and about a 5X, you just bring them.
Well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll cut you a deal. You keep walking, and I'll get you a 4.
There you go.
Everybody's got that shirt in their closet, their wife or somebody wants to, baby, I'm going to get back into that.
Yeah.
And she's like, whatever. This thing's like spring of 98. I was like, look, I lost 2 pounds this weekend. You know what I mean? So
I got a whole wardrobe just like that.
Yeah.
I got to shrink down and get into it.
It's tough to lose weight in this town, man. I tell you, that's one thing Nashville can cook.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
There's so many. Like, people, I saw a lot of people in the lobby hadn't been here in a while, and they're like, what happened? I was like, it's called growth. Quick. But
somebody saw me got distracted there. You thought Daniels was walking by. No, they had a food tray they were bringing by.
Yeah, dude, it's great food here. And that's good. Let me tell you something now. You want some food recommendations? My man Grant,
he knows them.
He is the mayor
he's
of
the
Tell you, don't follow him on Instagram. You'll stay hungry and stay broke because that man's living it up right now.
Before you go, Rusty, can you tell the audience where can they find all your work?
Anywhere on Twitter, Rusty Mansell _, MANSELO _, and then Instagram. I haven't had a chance to change my name yet because I've got the old blue check on Instagram. Don't know how that happened, but that's still Mansell 247. So eventually I will. We had the Instagram guy. We had the Instagram guy here at the On 3 NIL event. It was funny because I was like, I need to talk to this guy about if I change my name, do I lose all that? As soon as it got over, I didn't realize Instagram. That's those kids' world. They swarmed him.
Yeah.
Like, hey, one of us verify. Like one of us verify, And I remember Sammy Brown, who's the 5-star. Sammy's like, hey man, I was like, this guy needs to be verified. I can assure you this guy needs to be verified. So I waited my turn and kind of talked to the guy from him and said, look, if I change my name, and he gave me the email me and put this. Yeah, I didn't hear from him. So I know that the guy that works for Instagram gets hit up. There's no telling.
I'd imagine.
No telling. So. But it's fun. Thank you guys for having me, man.
So much,
Again,
Rusty.
I can't thank you enough for the kind words, man, you said about me. And you doing a good job, man.
Appreciate it.
And my mom, you got the proof from my mom now. My mom said, I'll just sit around and watch that podcast sometimes. So if the views go up about 3 every week, my mom's laying somewhere on the beach in Florida just watching it on her phone. So I appreciate that, man, so much. Thank you, guys.
Oh, Rusty never disappoints, does he? That was one of my favorite interviews of Media Days. Another guy that never disappoints, Mike Griffith. You never know where he's going to go, what he's going to say. I look up to Mike. I really appreciate all his time. From Dog Nation, let's kick it over to Mike Griffith.
He's that good.
Well, we're a fan of you, Mike Griffith.
Well, I appreciate
Dog
that.
Nation. I pulled Mike out of the big ballroom. About half a dozen other people saying, hey, we got to get you on, Mike. You're gold every time you're on. You're always gold for us, so we appreciate you making time for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, no problem, guys. I appreciate it.
Anything you learned from Kirby and company yesterday?
You know, more than anything, it was just kind of an overall sense that Kirby's in the right place right now, you know, and that Georgia's in the right place right now. I mean, look, it's been a well-documented, challenging off-season, and you wondered, well, what happens when we get to Nashville at SEC Media Days? What does Georgia look like? What does Georgia sound like? How is Georgia perceived, right?
Right.
And I felt more of a vibe of joy than I've felt since the second quarter of the TCU game.
Yeah.
Honestly. I mean, it was just like, this is what a two-time defending national championship program is supposed to look and sound like. And I give Kirby credit for that because he's at the top of the chain and everything kind of trickles down from the leader. And Kirby was as engaging, as charismatic as I've ever heard him in the time that I've covered him going back to 2018.
What'd you make of old Nick Saban there talking cakes and Europe? And
entertaining as always, you know, must-see theater, a gift to the league, a 7-time national champion. I can't get the comparison of Saban and Dale Earnhardt out of my mind when I think about the Intimidator in the black number 3 car.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think about Alabama and Nick Saban and the same effect that you just say it and people say, where? And even if people don't like Alabama, they always want to know how Alabama did.
Right.
And it was the same way when we used to turn on a NASCAR race. Who's winning? Where's Earnhardt? How'd your favorite team do? What Alabama do today? You know, and I think about that. I was at Daytona in 2001 on that fateful day when the Intimidator crashed in the final turn on the last lap, which just – and the thought that went through my mind, I had to write a column about how much I appreciated Dale Earnhardt, what he meant to the sport, and I'd never really stopped and reflected because he was just one of those guys that you think is always going to be there. And of late, the last couple of years, when this Saban Intimidator things just keeps going through my mind, is I relish the opportunities to listen to him.
Yeah.
I appreciate the opportunities to watch the program that he's built, what Alabama means to the SEC, even as Georgia has conquered them and won the last 2 national titles. Alabama remains must-see theater, as does Nick Saban. So right. I appreciated it. I love the. You know, I was sitting next to Tommy Dees, a longtime Tuscaloosa News guy. Now he's one of the senior managers with USA Today Sports. You know, clearly one of the industry leaders. And he said, now who else in the world can compare football to baking a cake and pull it off? I said nobody. But he says it's true, right? So now there's going to be a bunch of Alabama fans thinking about cake and their favorite players and what coach, and other people like myself thinking the same thing.
Yeah, I'll be thinking about cake all day, Mike.
Hey,
I want to ask you, complacency was a popular word yesterday. Yeah. How does this team not get complacent with Georgia? Again, we're going back to Georgia Bulldogs here.
Sure. Well, here's the thing, and nobody would ever recommend it or prescribe it, but this off-season has created a lot of challenges, as we talked about, and a lot of really challenging reminders of what real adversity is. Yeah. Sense of loss of a former teammate and recruiting staffer, and well-documented January 15th crash. You know, if that doesn't humble you and bring you down to earth, and I think the program has been under great scrutiny, as all championship programs are. Right. You know, and I go back to 1998 when I was covering Tennessee, and I remember the very next season, 99, and I think it was, I want to say leading into the season, I came downstairs. I was on the verge of going to maybe a fall ball press conference, and I turned on ESPN, and ESPN said, you know, and next after the break, a story about Tennessee football that's going to change the face of the sport as we know it. And I'm thinking, what in the world? I cover this team. What are they talking about? What could this possibly be? Well, it was the story of Linda Bensel-Myers and how the Tennessee athletic director, or excuse me, the Tennessee athletic department once oversaw athletes' academic compliance and tutoring. And the Linda Bensel-Myers was a professor that took issue with that. Now, at that time, 40% of the schools in the country had their athletic department oversee the academic compliance. But Tennessee was the national champion. And that's what the reporter was able to come up with during his week-long intervention into, or intervention is probably not the right word, but his week-long stay in Knoxville when he was there reporting. And I'll never forget, this guy was at one of the practices. We didn't know what he was there for. His name was Tom Ferry. He was a very good investigative reporter. We didn't know what he was there for. He told Tennessee he was there to write a story about how a model program is run. So they opened up all the doors and gave him all the access. And we're watching a scrimmage, and he's asking somebody about who the quarterback is, and he's asking a guy that doesn't even really cover the team, and the answers were terrible. And I'm thinking, this is going to be an awful story. This reporter is terrible. Well, that was all the guys. He was really there to do the investigative reporting on the academics. But long sidebar there. But the point is, whoever wins the national championship goes under a greater degree of scrutiny, and Georgia's a two-time champion. And even though they keep things buttoned up, there has been a rash of speeding incidents that have been documented, right? So the story's there. I can guarantee you that every program in the country is looking at that saying, hey, what does our compliance look like in that area? How are our recruiting rental car programs set up? Everybody is going to scrutinize their program in those areas. How do we deal with speeding? Do we know what kind of car every kid is driving? Should there be some extra education for the kids that are driving cars that go 0 to 60 in 3.5 and top out at 180 miles an hour like a Jeep Trackhawk that these kids covet, right?
Yeah.
So I suppose my thought is, as challenging as an offseason as it's been, I think the Georgia players have certainly had to learn to live under a greater deal of scrutiny. They've probably felt like the media has been after them a little bit. So I'm guessing, Mike, that they would probably maybe circle the wagons, right? It's Georgia against the world once again for different reasons. Although I will say the players didn't come off that way yesterday. They didn't come off as defensive. They came off as very responsible. But look, I think Georgia knows what they're up against. I mean, look, they're only a couple plays away from losing 2 games last year. I mean, it could have easily lost to Missouri, easily lost to Ohio State. And then one of the things I love about media, and I wasn't there for this, but I read the transcript. Was there a reporter from Kentucky that was like, Kentucky played you guys better than anybody last year? And I'm thinking, did I miss something here? I don't remember that. I don't remember Kentucky playing Georgia better than. But anyway, maybe that was the only game this guy saw. You know, got over 1,000 quote-unquote media people here, so who knows who asked the question. I'm not sure.
If Kirby was being completely honest, do you think that he would have rather played Oklahoma? And I realize why they didn't play it and all that, but the last couple of years, Clemson to open with, they were underdog. Oregon, they weren't underdog against Oregon, but that was something, everyone was saying they lost all this. This is going to be a rough start. And right out the gate, they come out and they destroyed Oregon, and everyone said, oh, well, we got to reevaluate who's number one. They don't have that game this year.
Right.
Do you think, I don't know that's going to hurt them, but I don't think it helps them.
Well, under the circumstances, I think this year it does help them this year. Because the quarterback situation is unsettled. Yeah. Because we really don't know who the quarterback is. Now, Carson Beck is the clear leader in the clubhouse, but until he earns the coach's trust and shows how he can prosper under adversity, I'll give you an example. 2017, Jacob Eason. I think everyone recognized that Jacob Eason had a higher ceiling than Jake Fromm. His arm is huge, still is huge. Yeah. But yet it was Jake Fromm that was the Georgia quarterback moving forward because Kirby felt like he could trust Jake's decision-making more than Jacob Eason. And I'm not saying that I necessarily don't think that Beck will be the guy, but what I'm saying is it's not done. And because they don't play Oklahoma, they can take a different approach to this quarterback situation. I remember Michigan State's Rose Bowl year I covered in, 2013. I think Mark D'Antonio played 3 quarterbacks through the first 3 games. Now, you could argue that bit the Spartans on the ass because they lost at Notre Dame in Game 4. I think it had more to do with 5 phantom pass interference penalties that Tommy Rees, the Alabama offensive coordinator, I believe he was the quarterback then, they were the benefactor of at Notre Dame. They get a few calls there now and then. But point is, I think that because they don't have that Oklahoma game, I think they can play this quarterback competition out. Now, you can ask me the same question on September 30th. You know, they'll play at Auburn, and while I think that Auburn is sneaky good and Hugh Freeze is good and sneaky, whatever order you want to put that in, that game is a threat because it will be the first road start for one of those quarterbacks. And Jordan-Hare Stadium is a house of horrors.
Yeah.
I said horrors. Don't Shane. Don't give me that look. I saw you over there. And
clip that.
And so I think that is a dangerous game.
Yeah.
In that respect.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of interesting. I think you're the first one that ever talked about quarterback competition. You know, everybody wants to just pencil in Beck, and that, you know, hell, they're baking a cake
you gotta
down
know,
there too.
You got to know Kirby, though.
Yeah.
You know, 4 out of 7 years he's played more than one quarterback, and it's very thorough. You know, the thing about these defensive-minded – D'Antonio was the same way, of another Nick Saban protege, I might add. The thing about the defensive-minded coach is their attitude is, well, hell, you just coach these guys like they're anybody else. They're quarterback, cornerback, linebacker. No. Offensive coaches, you know, Spurrier, no. This is a different – the quarterback is a different animal. It's a different breed.
Absolutely.
It's the same animal. It's a different breed, though.
Yeah.
Right? You don't – now, but the defensive coaches, they're a little bit more tougher-minded, and, well, you need to show – you know, he needs to be able to handle that.
Absolutely.
Send him to the bench or yell at him in front of everybody. Whereas, you know, I think about a quarterback whisperer, and I see David Cutcliffe walking around, and I think about how David managed his quarterbacks. And now you better believe there was great discipline at Tennessee under David Cutcliffe. I mean, right down to the quarter of an inch of where guys lined up and getting it right. But you never really saw David Cutcliffe, you know, lose his junk on a quarterback. And you never felt like David Cutcliffe quarterbacks were anything but extremely prepared and polished. Whereas, you know, Kirby, you know, I watched one time against Michigan. Stetson came off the field before halftime. They had beaten the heck out of Michigan that year, 3 or 4 times. And he went off on Stetson Bennett like he fumbled 5 times. And at the end, well, what was that all about? Well, he was mad at he didn't call a timeout. Well, wait a minute. Couldn't Kirby have called a timeout? Do you guys remember that game I'm talking about? That would, you know, so I guess my point is Georgia manages it differently. There's good competition there. You'll see that play out in September. And I'd be really surprised if we didn't see more than one quarterback start over the course of the season.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, because of the depth.
Yeah.
Now, we know you know Tennessee well from your time there.
Sure.
You've got family there.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I got 3 kids there.
And we know you have a relationship with Jeremy Pruitt.
Yeah.
So what was your reaction to the NCAA ruling and everything?
Yeah.
Do you think they got it right, or?
Well, you know, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what right is. I mean, you know, if they were trying to, you know, make an example of Jeremy, or, you know, the what was it? Someone wrote to the NCAA and threatened to sue him if you punish the team or something like that. Yeah. It's like, well, I guess we can only do so much Tennessee, so let's just throw it all on Jeremy. You know, I mean, a 6-year show cause to me seems extreme. Yeah. Because that's somebody's livelihood.
Right.
I mean, could you make your point without ruining somebody's life?
Right.
And do we really believe Jeremy Pruitt was doing anything that different than anywhere else in the league, if we're being honest about it? And I don't know that. It's not like I go, I can list blah, 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 blah. Right. I don't. Or, you know, I would, you know, obviously be obligated to report it's the right thing to do. But I don't know that. But we've all been around long enough. And I think fans, certainly Tennessee fans, have been around long enough, as have these, you know, fans here in Nashville. It seemed extreme. I feel like there's another side to the story we don't know yet. I don't know that people really want to know it.
Yeah.
I don't know that anybody really wants that part of the story to get out. I think it's conveniently packaged, put away.
Especially volunteer fans.
Well, I mean, look, I mean, listen, Tennessee fans, look, these are good times that are coming. I mean, Tennessee people, oh, Tennessee's coming. No, Tennessee's here. I've been on that campus. I've seen those facilities. I feel that vibe every time I go back into town. This is 1990s. I'm getting flashbacks, okay? Now, I don't know if the Vols are going to win a national title this year or next year, but when I think about the success that I see in all the sports, and when I think about how the leadership seems aligned from the president to the athletic director into the coaching staff, Tennessee is back where it was. Now, it took some tough times, since Diamond Doug Dickey, left as athletic director. The real problem happened when somebody decided to put the chancellor to oversee athletics. That was an absolute disaster. I don't need to mention Jimmy Cheek and Joe DiPietro's names, so I won't. But when you've got poor leadership like that, it can bring an entire program down, and they did.
Yeah.
Butch Jones trying to hire an offensive coordinator, and they say you can't spend more than $500,000. That is ridiculous, but that's where Tennessee was.
Well, we were talking with Matt Hayes yesterday, and he was kind of joking, but I think he was making a good point for what Tennessee did. What happens if Billy Napier doesn't live up to the expectations, Jimbo Fisher? The smart thing, instead of paying these buyouts, is exactly what you said.
Find cause.
Bring the NCAA in. It saved Tennessee some money. It could save some others. And, could you potentially see that happening?
Well,
and again, we're not saying Napier's cheating.
You're talking about Billy Napier.
We're not saying Jimbo's cheating.
I was just having Bruce Pearl flashbacks a minute ago. Talked about Tennessee fumbling a Hall of Fame coach away. Not that Rick Barnes hasn't done a sensational job. He has, but, has anybody done better than Bruce Pearl in Auburn? Could you have ever imagined the day that Auburn basketball –
they were completely irrelevant.
I just can't even – and I covered Auburn basketball way back. And when Bruce took that job, I was like, this job's going to kill him. Yeah. He's going to coach so hard. And he's killed it. Didn't they beat North Carolina and Kentucky in one turn, something stupid like that? And I should have known he could do it because I watched him do it at Tennessee. But I digress. I just had a discussion with some friends from Jacksonville about Billy Napier, and they're convinced that even if Florida has a losing record this year, that Billy Napier would be back for a third season.
Yeah,
I don't see it, man. It's easy to say that now, but I can't imagine. Florida hasn't had a coach have back-to-back losing seasons since the 1940s.
Right.
I can't even imagine that. And what seems even more crazy to me is that you have got arguably the greatest college football offensive mind sitting there 2.5 miles away.
Yeah.
Steve Spurrier.
Yeah.
How in the world is he not part of the solution? How in the world do you not consult with Steve Spurrier? And yes, I'll admit, I have an interest in Coach Spurrier. I am the chairman for his coaching award, and so I've built a relationship up with him over the last few years, and I can tell you, he's still Steve Spurrier. The other part of him that I'll share with you guys is that he is one of the most loyal, warm personalities that I have ever met. What we saw on Saturdays, and again, it's unique that I'm the chairman because I never covered him.
Yeah.
I always covered the other team. I covered Auburn. I covered Alabama. I covered Tennessee. I covered Georgia. So I know of Spurrier from the other side of things. But now, haven't seen what's behind the curtain down there in Gainesville, and a lot of these 1990s Gators come back for this Spurrier Award. Last year, Sonny Dykes won, and the legend was Bob Stoops. You kind of see the magic, and you see the connection, and it really wasn't that much different than when I felt at Tennessee with Al Wilson and T. Martin and Peerless Price. And you guys know, right? You've been around it. I'm seeing it happen now with Georgia, that connection, that connectivity.
Yeah.
It takes a coach with great charisma and leadership to bring that out. And I just don't think Billy Napier has it.
Yeah.
I think he's a good football coach. I think he's a good man. But that's not enough. You got to have charisma. And you got to have a long enough runway. And if you have losing seasons at Florida, that just doesn't cut it. We know that fan base. We know that level of arrogance and self-importance. They can't hack a third year of Billy Napier if they don't have a respectable season and beat a Florida State or a Utah or a Tennessee.
Right.
They just aren't going to go back to being downtrodden. The money people there just won't tolerate it. And the question is, if they could hire any coach they wanted, who would they get if they fire Billy Napier? I've already got him fired. You've already heard that. I've already passed judgment. Sorry, Billy. I could be wrong about all this. He might win 10 games this year.
Yeah.
All you need to know is that, Georgia's leading returning wide receiver is a guy named Ladd McConkey.
Yeah.
Tennessee fans are like, oh, boy. We know he was a Tennessee fan, and Jim Chaney never made it to his house. Everybody makes jokes. Jim stopped at a cafe somewhere. No, he didn't. He went to the high school. He just never went for the in-home visit. But Billy Napier's from that hometown and didn't even offer the guy a scholarship. I will say this. Stetson Bennett was headed to play for Billy Napier at Louisiana before Kirby Smart's 11th hour call on signing day in 2019. So at least he recognized Stetson Bennett. Yeah. But this is a guy that didn't even recruit a kid from his. So we'll see what happens. I like the guy. And I know it sounds like I'm picking on him a little bit, but the reality of it is he didn't do a great job last year, and that's a place you better do a great job.
Well, sticking with Florida, 5 years from now, is Florida, Georgia going to still be at a neutral site? Yeah. I know Kirby's not a fan of that.
You know what? There's a few people that are, and they're very important people, and there's some fans that are too. But to your point, as competitive as things are, it's just hard for me to imagine. Like, could you imagine if Tennessee and South Carolina played every year in Myrtle Beach, or if Alabama played LSU every year in New Orleans? Yeah. I mean, you're not going to give up that big game. You're just not going to give up an opportunity, especially now. And I pointed this out, and I didn't do this to take a jab at Georgia fans, but just to enlighten them. You know, I look at what your athletic director there, Danny White, is doing, and some of the plans for Neyland Stadium and what they're going to do down there, and how it's going to be kind of like the Braves ballpark where they're going to put the restaurants and a landing. It's going to be an unbelievable vision. Yeah. Tennessee is going to jump ahead of so many other programs with what they're going to do around Neyland Stadium. And Philip Fulmer kind of opened it up with the walkway idea that he'd always had, and now we're hearing about restaurants. And can you imagine, guys, what that scene's going to be like when they do that? Yeah. And everybody can just stay right there around the stadium. And I mean, I just, as if there's not enough orange and white already. I just can't imagine. And meanwhile, Georgia's taking their best game and giving that $45 million of economic impact to Northeast Florida. You know, I don't know if you've been to the Gainesville airport lately, but I think they got about 16 gates, right? Yeah. Athens doesn't have public flights going in and out, right? Yeah. If you want to look at the schools and the city infrastructure between Gainesville, which is 70 miles from Jacksonville, and Athens, Georgia, it pales considerably. So there's a lot of inner workings and politics behind it. But to your point, common sense would dictate that you're going to want to bring more value to your community where your university is at. I mean, Brock Bowers just told us yesterday a big part of the reason he chose Georgia was Athens. Yeah. It really is an amazing college town. I think it's the best college town in the country. I think it edges out Ann Arbor, right? Right. Now, you say Knoxville. Knoxville's a city. Knoxville is a metropolitan. Knoxville is a major league city that follows a college program. Right. Right. So that's why I don't compare. That's apples and oranges, no pun intended. Apples and oranges, right? Yeah. But when we talk about college towns, the Auburns, the Starkvilles, the Oxfords, Athens is so unique. I agree with you. You've been there, right? I've been there, absolutely.
Athens better than Columbia, Missouri? I'm kidding.
You had me going there.
All right, last thing for you, Mike. Really appreciate your time. The question, this is the only question Dog fans really have. Yeah. Do they go 3 for 3 for the first time in the AP poll history?
Wow. That's the betting guy would say no. I mean, nobody's done it since Minnesota in 1936. Georgia's won 27 straight regular season games going back to playing Florida and Jacksonville in 2020. There's been so many changes in that program, in their personnel. I mean, Jalen Carter was like two people. Yeah. It's like they had 12 guys on the field because he literally was. Well, you saw it. I mean, Kirby called him a train wrecker, and havoc maker, and he was. And Kenny McIntosh, which I still don't understand how he slipped in the draft, but this guy was like Marshall Faulk with his ability to catch the ball downfield. He was a receiver, and then when he needed to be a running back, he was running over people down the stretch. Kendall Melton is incredibly talented, but can he catch the wheel route 35 yards? Can he beat the linebacker? Do they have it? Darnell Washington, Agent Zero, Tennessee called him, among other things apparently in one of these reports. Was a game changer, 6'8", 270. Yeah. Even though he only caught 28 balls, he changed how you had to defend Georgia. Right. When you've got a guy like that, it's an impossible matchup. If you go big, he runs routes on you. If you go small, they truck you. And he's gone. So the Georgia offense, a lot of people are going to say, oh, well, Todd Monken's gone. And Monken was ingenious, no doubt. but they're going to be a more conventional offense. They're not going to have that double tight end with that do everything back.
Yeah.
They're going to be more of a 3-wide receiver. And I love it. The transfer from Missouri, I think he's a game breaker. I think Ladd McConkey is special. They don't have the elite X, though, that they did before Adonai Mitchell transferred. We've talked about the uncertainty at quarterback. Offensive line is tremendous. But do they have the players that can swing those games, like Missouri, like Ohio State? And the other teams are going to be lined up for Georgia, right? They're going to know what they're going to get from the Bulldogs defense. And every year it gets a little bit tougher. That's why no teams ever three-peated. So if you're asking where I would bet my money, I would say no. But I can't pick a game and say that's going to be the game. Yeah. I mean, I mentioned Auburn only because it's on the road and only because it's first road game. A lot of people point to Tennessee. I think that's too obvious. I think, and Kirby's got an edge for Tennessee, man. I mean, he never beat the Vols.
Playing
never beat the Vols as a player.
Yeah.
And I've talked to players that Coach Smart's a little different that week, okay? And Auburn and Tennessee bring out the best or the worst in them, depending on how you look at it.
Right.
You know, that's a very and now this Tate Ratledge kid, my goodness,
man.
He'll never hear the end of it talking about how Neyland Stadium was the best stadium in the league. And you better believe that'll probably be his best game of the year. And Tennessee's got some great potential, and Coach Heupel's obviously an unbelievable coach, and we'll see what happens with their quarterback and their defense. By the way, we know the fans are going to show up. Right. We know what the environment's going to be like, but I almost feel like that's one that's going to be circled for Georgia. So I'd say no, but I can't tell you. I can't say, well, that's the game, because game by game, you say they quote-unquote should win all of them.
Yeah.
But again, I'll flash back to Tennessee. I'll flash back to 1999 and tell you guys a story. So Florida had lost 8 of their 11 starters on defense, and Tennessee brought back Jamal Lewis and Travis Henry and Chad Clifton and Cozy Coleman and all sorts of college football Hall of Famers. T. Martin was back for another year, and he said, oh, my gosh, they're going to win another national title. All they lost was Al Wilson and Peerless Price, 2 pretty good players, but they had so much back. Raynock Thompson and Eric Westmoreland and I think Deion might have already left. No, it was Deion, but no, Deion Grant was back. They were so loaded. You just knew they were going to go back-to-back. But they're playing Florida. It's the second game of the season down the Swamp. And this guy named Alex Brown. You guys remember? You know where I'm going with this?
God.
Unfortunately.
He still have nightmares.
He had 5 sacks in the game.
Yeah.
Could not figure out what was going on. Trying to remember the name of the right tackle.
Do you remember what T. Martin said leading up to that game?
Was it Josh Tucker? Was that the name of the right tackle for that game? What did T say?
He said something like Gainesville, it's no different than playing in Lexington. And they played that all week long on the radio. I remember that.
Now you got Milton out there.
That wasn't it. That wasn't what did it. Did you guys ever hear why Alex Brown had 5 sacks in that game? Oh, I get to tell you a Tennessee secret. This is good. So Spencer Riley was the center, and T was the quarterback, and they'd worked out a little deal where right before T would say hut, he'd give a little tap. So it was hut, right? Alex Brown picked up on that. So the ball was moving on that tip before T would say hut. So that's why the right tackle, and I think, gosh, I don't know if it's, but I remember at one time Cozy Coleman came back to huddle and said, and then Cozy dropped back to try to block this rush end from his guard spot because he had a better angle, right? But that's what it was. They were tipping off the snap for Alex Brown. And that little detail took Tennessee off the rails for a national championship. They beat Florida without that. There's no question. You could talk about Jamal Lewis not picking up a yard, but again, T called an audible and Florida pointed right where he was going. I mean, Florida did great. My point is this. Little things like that can completely derail a season. And Georgia has been on the right side of those breaks the last 2 years. But they'll tell you about 2nd and 26 in 2017 when Tua looked off the safety and hit Devontae Smith. They'll tell you they should have won that game. They'll tell you about 2018 and what went wrong. That was a very good Georgia team in 2018. Capable. They lose their outside linebacker to injury, and the next guy up still doesn't know how to play contain. Little things can make a difference. And the last 2 years, Georgia's gotten the breaks, Mike. And for them to win a 3rd title, they got to get the breaks again. And in the SEC, usually the odds kind of catch up to you, just like they did Tennessee in 1999, just like they did Alabama. It'll be fun to see. It's been a historic program to cover. I've covered 3 programs now that had undefeated season. I covered 93 Auburn when they went 11-0. I covered the 13-0 Vols, and now last year's Georgia team. And I can tell you, every one of them, the consistent theme was they got the breaks.
Yeah.
And it's just it's like sitting at the poker table, man. You know, some nights you're red hot and you're thinking you're a really good poker player. Other nights you can't get the cards. It doesn't matter what you do.
Right.
So there's a lot of fate involved.
Yeah.
I'll just say
Absolutely.
I really appreciate it, Mike. Before you go, tell the audience, where can they find all your work?
Well, they can find me on Twitter at MikeGriffith32, and they can read me at dognation.com, and I'll be on the SEC Network again on Thursday nights on the Feinbaum Show. And whenever you guys will give me an opportunity to sit down with you, I love to do that too.
Absolutely. So. Thank you so much.
All right. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
That was great. Well, he even got to poke old Hugh there at Auburn. So let's go to the Auburn Tigers. Hugh Freeze, year one impact. The fans are fired up. What's it going to take to have another big debut season for Hugh Freeze? Let's kick it over to Auburn's first-year coach.
Mentioned publicly before that everywhere you've been, you guys and your coaching staff has done a great job of turning around programs quickly on a timeline that's probably quicker. How do you rank the Auburn situation coming into your two previous stops? Easier, harder, as far as getting the timeline expedited?
If you'll permit me, I would love to. So when I took over at Arkansas State, they had never had a winning season since going FBS. And we won 10 games in year one, won the Sun Belt Conference. Then we come to Ole Miss, and they had not won an SEC game in 2 years. And we win 7 games that year and go to a bowl game. Then Liberty moving to FBS, which I thought was probably after spring ball. I was like, we will not win a game, you know, because somehow we won 8 games. Now, how do I compare Auburn to that? I've thought about this question, and I honestly don't know. I would think it would be easier at Auburn, but yet the league probably has gotten better than it was when I took over at Ole Miss, and so I'm not sure that's an accurate feeling. Now, I was blessed at all of those spots to have quarterbacks that played really well. Bo Wallace and Ryan Applin at Arkansas State, and then Buckshot to Malik at Liberty. And I think you don't have a trigger guy that plays well, you don't have much of a chance to turn it very fast. And so I think a lot will weigh upon how effective we are at that spot. But great question. We have had success doing that. I hope that continues.
Coach left side.
So this is interesting. I didn't quite realize this. I'm not a Hugh Freeze fanatic here, but went back and looked at his first years. Like Marler said, I mean, he's done a great job everywhere he's been, particularly that first year. First FBS job, Arkansas State in 2011. They went 10-2, like he said there. They were 4-8 the year prior. 2012 Ole Miss, 7-6. Not a great record, but what were they the year before? 0-10. So that's a massive improvement. And at Liberty, his first year, 2019, they went 8-5. They were 6-6 the year prior. So the last 3 stops, they've gotten better each and every season. They should do that again. It'll be a major disappointment if they don't. Now, part of that is, you know, Auburn was so poor last year, but I mean, it's a difficult slate. He didn't inherit much. You heard it from him. You know, they got to have a quarterback. They've got a couple of options. We'll see what they look like in this offense, but in Philip Montgomery's system, they should really take off on that side of the ball, particularly if they can get a quarterback to come in there. Very quarterback-friendly system that they got now, running that Baylor, Josh Heupel, Lane Kiffin-style offense there on the Plains. Now, one other thing, I didn't realize this, missed this at the time. I realized that they had sold out of season tickets, but according to Hugh, this is the most season tickets ever sold in the offseason in program history. Them Tigers, baby, they're fired up for the debut of the Hugh Freeze era.
Right side, back row.
Corey LeBounty, WNSP 105.5 in Mobile, Alabama. Coach, you've been on the job close to 8 months now. What have you learned most about the Auburn culture, and what fascinates you most about the Auburn program?
it may be the most welcoming, friendliest. Listen, we love we love the community. We love our church there. It's been incredible. Our pastor Miles has been awesome. My family is all there, so that makes it better for me, truthfully. I don't know. I feel like I'm the luckiest coach to have, two of our daughters are out of school and married, and to have them there, and then our youngest to be a student there, and us to all get to experience this together probably makes it better. Not that the other places haven't been. We loved our time in Oxford and have great friends there, and Lord, our time on Liberty Mountain was incredible too. But the passion that the Auburn people have for this program and their hunger to see it return is evident everywhere you go. Listen, for us to sell more season tickets at this point than ever in the history of the program, I don't think that speaks to me or our staff. I just think it speaks to the fact that the Auburn people are showing their support for this program and what they believe it can be. So it's been really welcoming.
And I guess this shouldn't surprise me either, considering all the incredible environment that those fans showcased after Harsin got let go and Cadillac became interim. Man, they were willing Cadillac to be the next head coach. Obviously now he's associate head coach, still on staff, so who knows? He may be the next coach after Hugh Freeze. But to say Auburn fans are fired up, that's an understatement right there. Cannot wait to see what Auburn brings to the table this fall, because SEC football it's not the same without Auburn being a competitive program and one that you got to circle every year against LSU, against Georgia, against Bama, against Ole Miss, Mississippi State, on and on and on. Auburn, you want them to be good again. The SEC is just not the same when Auburn's down. So next, let's kick it over to this interview. Nathan King from Auburn 24/7 Sport. He's one of the sharpest guys, not only covering Auburn, but in the entire SEC. Really appreciate Nathan spending some time with us at SEC Media Days. All right, we're joined by Nathan King, Auburn Undercover 24/7 Sports Network. Nathan, thank you so much for joining us in person.
Yeah, of course. Good to meet you guys. Been doing your show here for a couple years, meeting Shane for the first time, so good to be here.
And obviously Hugh Freeze, one of the biggest storylines here at Media Days, and it's night and day different with the optimism. But what is realistic expectations, do you think, for Auburn year one under Hugh Freeze?
Sure. So, as you guys know, the schedules are never kind to Auburn. That's kind of what you agree to in the SEC West, soon to be obviously divisionless. But, you look at strength of schedules, Auburn's always near the top. And so I think this year things play out pretty favorably if you're looking at a year one for a head coach, because if you go on the road and you beat Cal, which Auburn is playing for the first time this season, week 2 in Berkeley, you do that, you're going to be 4-0 in the non-con, and then you pick up a couple SEC wins, you'll be back to a bowl game. And I know that's not where Auburn fans want to be long term. Like, obviously they want to be doing a lot more than a bowl game, but you guys know as well as anybody the depths they fell to. Not only their record under Brian Harsin, but the roster was just obviously in shambles. And so I was wondering what next year was going to look like when Hugh Freeze was hired. Obviously thought he was a really good coach, thought it was a good fit, thought it was a good hire. The transfer portal is what turned me around. The work they did in about 3 months' time, I hesitate to say flip the roster, but really improve a ton of different positions, and then they went and got themselves an actual quarterback, really made me think, okay, this team can win 7 games next year. Again, not the long-term expectation. Freeze has talked about it many times. 12-team playoff is maybe something you could see like a 9-3 Auburn get in pretty often. That's what they want in the long term, but I think at this point 6 or 7 wins is definitely sort of a baseline expectation for this team.
Is it too hard to know what the offense will be with all the moving parts? But with Philip Montgomery coming in there, I'm excited to see if they run that Baylor-style offense. Everywhere he's been, highly, highly productive quarterbacks. May not have that type of year this year at Auburn, but Hugh Freeze is saying, Ashford and Thorne, we got 2 guys we can play with here. What do you think the offense will look like this year?
Yeah, I'm glad you bring up Montgomery. That's not something that's talked about enough. I think that is a really good fit when you talk about what they want to do on offense. Good fit with what Hugh Freeze has done in the past. And everywhere you look, like you mentioned, he's had good quarterback play. I know it's a while ago, but Robert Griffin III turned out pretty well. Case Keenum obviously did a bunch, but even at Tulsa, you look at some of the quarterbacks he had there, extreme productivity on offense. And so I think Thorne fits into that system really, really well. They do need to have a good ground game to complement it. And obviously a big storyline this week was the availability of Jarquez Hunter. That's such a murky situation. We still don't have any clarity on that. But if he's unavailable even for just a couple games, that's going to be a big blow to them, obviously replacing Tank Bigsby. To me, where I come back to and put a big focus on for this team, as you guys know, offensive line has been, it's been so inconsistent for this Auburn team. They've had good quarterbacks cycle in. Jarrett Stidham was an NFL quarterback. Bo Nix is going to be an NFL quarterback, and they're just running for their lives. It's been a really, really inconsistent O-line for this team. They bring in 3 transfers, 3 of the top 10 24/7 offensive linemen at center, at left tackle, and right tackle. In the spring, those guys slotted right in. I think they have a chance to one of their better O-lines, maybe since 2018, 2017. I think this can be a really good offensive line for them, and so I think that's probably the point that you're looking at on the offense and saying where can they take the biggest step forward next season. But in terms of meshing, you guys heard Hugh Freeze talk about it. It is Philip Montgomery's show. It's kind of the standard play calling setup that you see a lot of the time. It's his show, but Hugh Freeze reserves the right to come in and change some things every once in a while. So I thought it was funny because it's a little bit different than the previous day when I forget what Jimbo's words were, but he probably will call plays. Yeah, he'll probably have control of the offense. So I was like, all right, already off to a great start with that relationship. So yeah, I'm interested to see how their offense grows together.
Hey, if you were a gambling man, who would you say would be the quarterback the final week of Auburn's year?
Yeah, it's tough for me to not say Peyton Thorne at this point. 7 times the number of career touchdown passes that Robbie Ashford has. You're talking 49 to 7 last year for Ashford. And to give proper context and credit where credit is due for Robbie Ashford last year, number one, dealt with every injury you could even name from head to toe because he was a guy that, look, there wasn't much working. He was putting his body on the line. A really good athlete who could run the ball. Number two, we just talked about it. They didn't have a great O-line. He didn't have much help in that department. And another position group we haven't talked about is receiver that I think they've really upgraded in the transfer portal. He didn't have a number one guy. I don't even know if he had a number 2 or a number 3 guy. And so you looked at the group coming back this year, you're saying they don't have a lot of alphas at receiver. And so it was tough last year for Ashford. He's in a better position to succeed. Let's say he is the starter. I think he will have a much better season under Hugh Freeze. And it was sort of a square hole, round peg sort of situation. Brian Harsin, adaptability was not necessarily in their vocabulary there for a couple years within that offense. And so they kept trying to pound that in there with Robbie Ashford, and it wasn't necessarily working to what they wanted to do, and they didn't really adapt very well. But, yeah, I'd have to go with Thorne. He's already made great impressions. Just talking to some players yesterday, he's already made great impressions within that building. Robbie's a great kid, though, and he's going to give him a fight because he, again, you can be the best pocket passer in the world, but Robbie can do some things that he can't. And so I'm interested to see what that looks like over the course of fall camp. Freeze said, give us about 10 practices and we'll cut the battle down to 2. We presume that's going to be Thorne and Ashford. It's just tough for me at this point with all the improvements they made on offense to not say, it'll be Peyton Thorne. I think that'll be a good thing. I think they'll be much better at quarterback than they were last year.
Well, covering Auburn, going from Brian Harsin to Hugh Freeze, isn't that just like a dream scenario? You could sprinkle a little Lane Kiffin in there here in the offseason. How awesome is this rejuvenation of Auburn?
It started under Cadillac is the thing. There's you mentioned those coaches. There's another one in there as well.
Yeah, that's true.
What a surreal end to last season that was. You're having Auburn play these inconsequential games. They're already clearly not going to a bowl game, and people have talked about it over and over again. But that Texas A&M home game, unbelievable. I had to leave the press box before it started because I just had to see them run on the field. It was just amazing. And so the way they kind of rallied there, that was such a good starting point. And Freeze did the smart thing. One of my buddies on the beat made a good point. When they were looking for any coach, he said, the one thing this coach has to do is tweet a picture shaking hands in his office with Cadillac. Automatic win, day one. You have to have it. He did almost that exact thing. The night he was hired, it was Cadillac's the associate head coach, and he posted a picture with him and everything. And so, fans are obviously going to be really mad if that didn't happen. But, Freeze's fit at Auburn, I think, is a word that gets thrown around a lot. Because I was in the camp, as I'm sure many people were, that thought Lane Kiffin would be an interesting hire. No reason to think his offenses wouldn't be good. No reason to think he wouldn't do a good job and contend in the West with the talent that Auburn has. Would he have been a 3-year rental? What happens if the Texas job comes open, or what happens if Freeze is in a position where, and he's talked about it this week, he only had a handful of jobs that he really wanted to leave Liberty for because he was chilling. He was obviously, working off some of his past transgressions and just kind of laying under the spotlight. Auburn was obviously one of those. We saw earlier this week that Tennessee apparently had him in the mix. I would imagine that would be a job he would have gone for if that would have been an opportunity for him. But, you're talking about the difference in covering them. It's pretty night and day.
Yeah.
There was a lot of stuff working against Brian Harsin that was out of his control. But I do think the fit wasn't as good at Auburn, and I don't think he necessarily had as great of a grasp of kind of what you need to do on the day in and day out. And I'm not just talking about, schmoozing boosters and stuff. That's obviously part of it. But look, somebody like Gus Malzahn didn't even like doing that. He just wanted to coach football, and he was still pretty successful at times as well. But I think Hugh Freeze, I kind of compare him a little bit to the fit that Bruce Pearl is for Auburn basketball. Just kind of knows what you need to do, and he's done a good job this offseason of even building up that goodwill within the fan base and sort of setting realistic expectations. Like, hey, you guys should be excited about A, B, and C, but we'll see what happens when we get on the field. Like, knowing the kind of uphill battle they've got, knowing the talent gap they have to close with Georgia and Alabama. They're still a long ways away, but I think he's done a good job of setting realistic expectations and just saying, look, we'll take this thing one day at a time and see where it gets us once we get back and better in recruiting and kind of see where it gets us down the road.
Well, I love tweeting out a lot of troll shit. And one of my favorite from last year, Cadillac Williams 1-0 versus Jimbo Fisher. That's
factual.
Yeah, right.
You're not lying to anybody.
I just love that. But what an atmosphere that was. But speaking of that Ole Miss game, how bad do you think that Auburn fan base wants to beat Lane Kiffin? Who knows how close that really was? But
sure.
I think there's some serious bad blood between the fans, and even seems like Hugh Freeze and Lane Kiffin. Of course, everyone's got bad blood with Lane Kiffin. It seems like at times. You know what?
Yeah, and sometimes it's fabricated on Kiffin's part. I feel like. I am excited to talk to Kiffin tomorrow. He's thrown some jabs, some lighthearted jabs at Freeze, like the day he got hired, when Freeze was saying that he thinks Auburn is a better job than Ole Miss. Kiffin responding to that, he knows how to play that up. Talking about how close it was, I can say it was very close. I remember sitting in my brother's dorm room on the campus of the University of Alabama before the Iron Bowl, and sort of sifting through that and realizing Kiffin's fallen off here, and Hugh Freeze is way up here. And then you cut to 48 hours later, and they've hired Hugh Freeze. And so I believe it was down to those two, and they ended up deciding on Hugh Freeze. Who knows if Kiffin would have taken the job, but I know for a fact that the only offer was extended to Hugh Freeze. No offer was extended to Lane Kiffin. Obviously, he signs the extension there. I'm glad you bring up that game, though, because that's one – obviously, they have Georgia and Alabama at home. Like, you got to circle those games. But that's a huge game for them this season, I think, because if we're breaking down the schedule, you could go 4-0 in the non-con. There's two SEC games you have to have. You go to Vanderbilt. I think they're better, like Clarkley a lot. You have to win that game.
Yeah.
And then you get Mississippi State at home, and for obviously all the wrong reasons. They're in a transition period. I think Auburn will be a good bit better than them. Have to win those two games. You look at that Ole Miss game. They play LSU, they play A&M, they play Georgia before that, and A&M's on the road. You could be 0-3 in the SEC. Sort of a backs against the wall, and then like you mentioned, you come home to Jordan-Hare, and you kind of just get to release some frustrations and just saying, we've got to go get an SEC win. I think that's really a good spot for them. I'm glad you bring that up about Kiffin. I've been saying the same thing where I think they will be really charged up, as much as Hugh Freeze maybe wants to downplay it, and I do think he enjoyed his tenure in Oxford for the most part, except for the way it ended. I think he'll be charged up about that game as well. I think the players will. And I think maybe some of the Lane Kiffin hate will be a bit fabricated as well, just because it was just a normal coaching search and they just didn't hire the guy. But I do think you're right. I think Auburn fans will be like, yeah, we're out to get Lane Kiffin. He didn't really do anything wrong. But I do think that'll be a really, really good environment. It was 2 years ago when Kiffin came and Auburn beat an Ole Miss team that I think was a good bit better than them and Jordan-Hare. I think that's a swing game. If you're talking about the difference between 6 and 7 wins, getting an Ole Miss team at home, I'll be interested to see what that team looks like this season. But getting them at home at a point of the year, midway through the season, where maybe your back is against the wall, maybe that's the difference between 6 and 7 wins for this Auburn team.
Well, I appreciate your time, brother.
Yeah, of course. Appreciate
y'all. For the fans, can you please tell them where to find you?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you can find me on Thread. I'm just kidding. You can find Twitter at NathanKing247, and then AuburnUndercover.com. Our whole crew was here this week. It was fun. It's the first time I've ever been here for all 4 days. Going to be here tomorrow as well. And so it's been a lot of fun. AuburnUndercover.com. You guys can go get all that coverage.
All right. Thank you so much.
Bro.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you. Yeah, thanks a bunch.
All right, next up, Mississippi State's debut head coach Zach Arnett. Of course, he was the head coach in the bowl game they won over old Burt up there at Illinois. So technically, he has coached a full game as a head coach, and he's undefeated. Best record in Mississippi State history for now. But one thing that really struck me about Zach Arnett, no-nonsense ball coach. And I think that fits Mississippi State well, particularly after the Pirate will miss him. We honor and tribute to him always, but significantly different personality, that old Pirate there in Zach Arnett, getting a tough-minded, no-nonsense guy, which Leach certainly was. He was a lot of people don't know that. He was an offensive line coach before he was ever an OC and soon-to-be Hall of Fame head coach. But Zach Arnett was asked about the defense, what would be changing, adding tight ends to the roster. You'll see some of this vibe that I picked up. I mean, this guy is just, he's all about the ball. He's all about the players. And I think that's the way you got to be to have success in the SEC, and particularly at Mississippi State.
You were the defensive coordinator. You have the free reign. Are you going to see much differences with your defense? And then also the tight end will be back in Starkville, I guess. It's become in vogue to use that position in the last 10 years or so. What can we see from the tight end position in the Mississippi State offense?
Oh, I think, defensively, we're going to do whatever it takes to hopefully play good defense and keep the opposing offense out of the end zone, right? That's ultimately the goal. Whether that is aggressive and blitzing and playing man coverage, whether that is vanilla, playing more traditional and playing coverage first, who knows if it's even being in the 3-3-5, right? We're going to get the best 11 players on the field. So if that's, for us, if that's 4 D linemen and 2 linebackers, we'll do that. Again, I'm the head coach now, but Matt Brock's the defensive coordinator, and he's spending a lot more time in that film room. Let's call it what it is. He's spending more time in there studying it than I am, right? That's why I had him call it in the bowl game, because I didn't think I was giving it the proper preparation in order to call a good game. I thought he would do a better job. And so we'll see when we line up the first week what our defense looks like. I'm sure it's going to be, largely much like it's been the last few years. And like you said, on offense, we do have guys in our program who are tight ends. Obviously, the tight end position is unique in that it creates longer edges in there in the box, right, which creates more gaps. It allows you to do some different run schemes, and then it opens up. And yet he's still athletic enough to create plays in the passing game, right? It opens up some different pass protections, play action passes off of it. And so if that is what gives us the best chance to move the football and score points, then yeah, we'll have a tight end out there at times. If it doesn't, if it's better to have 4 receivers, then we'll be in 10 personnel. And we got pretty good running backs too, so it might be in 20.
And on that same theme, new offensive coordinator Kevin Barbay, pretty interesting exchange here with Zach Arnett shared about the hiring process and trying to get a read on these offensive coordinators, what they wanted to bring to Mississippi State. Couldn't even answer the question, not because he's not knowledgeable, but because he had to see what he was inheriting at Mississippi State, Kevin Barbay, the new coordinator, said. So let's kick it over to Zach Arnett. I got some thoughts on this on the other side.
Of course, you have a new offensive coordinator this year in Kevin Barbay, who had one of the most efficient passing attacks last year at App State, and his offense was much more balanced in the air-raid system under Leach. I was going to ask you, what's the offensive identity going to be this year? Of course, are we going to see something much different than we have in the past few years, or is it going to be somewhat similar, or do you think, just overall, what is the identity of the offense for 2023? Yeah,
I'm glad you asked that, actually, because that was my first question on the offensive coordinator interviews as we went throughout this process was, hey, what's the identity, right? What's the offense going to look like when it runs out there? And it was really refreshing to hear, but Kevin said, well, I can't give you that answer until I know who the best 11 players are, right? And that level of humility, that it is not about the coordinator, it is not about the scheme maybe that's happened other places. It is about identifying the best players and getting them on the field, because you're always best served having your best players on the field. And so obviously that process started in spring practice. It's going to continue on through training camp, right? You mentioned the places that Kevin's been. He's had some of the most efficient and explosive offenses. They've been really good at scoring points, moving the ball. And everywhere he's been, it's looked a little bit different, whether it be the same school from year to year or whether it changes school. Well, why is that? Well, because you got different players, right? You go to different school, you got different players. Every year you got guys coming and going, right, to graduation, new players coming in because of recruiting. And so every year you're going to have a little bit different identity because it is all about the players. All right, coaches and scheme don't influence players. Players influence and affect the scheme with which you run. So, I mean, I'm sure we're going to be a little bit more balanced because, let's be honest, I don't think there's a person in college football who throws the ball as much as Mike Leach when he's calling plays, right? So I'm sure we'll run the ball a little bit more. But getting our best players on the field, if that's 10 personnel, that's 10 personnel. If that's 11, if that's 11, right? I can promise you, air raid is not the only offense that runs Y cross or 95. It's called 4 verts, 3-level flood. Every offense in the country runs those. It's just how they get to them is differently. Some do it in spread out sideline to sideline formations. Others do it in more condensed sets, traditional formations with a tight end. At the end of the day, you're trying to maximize and create space on offense and get the ball in your best player's hands.
Now, I've said this many times before on this show, but it rings true. These coaches, many of them got an ego, in case you didn't know. And the fact that here at Mississippi State, we're not letting ego get in the way. We're letting the players dictate the scheme. Now, they have to actually do that. They're saying they're going to do it, which is great. We got to see it on the field. But many of these guys simply will not do that. They think they're geniuses. They think they're there because they're, the sharpest offensive minds in college football, which is true. But you have to be willing to adapt. And we've seen great coaches in this league not last long or have great success and then fail to adapt, and then they're out on their ass before long. Particularly at Mississippi State. Well, let's just call it like it is. I mean, Mississippi State could recruit at a historic level, and they're probably still 4th, 5th best overall talent in the West. And I realize the West is going away, but still, the point remains the same. You are a little bit behind the 8 ball when it comes to overall talent and overall roster. So you have to play to the strengths of that roster. I think you have to do that at Mississippi State more than just about maybe 1 or 2 other schools in the SEC. So, again, I'm loving these comments here by Zach Arnett. And one last one from him. The level of experience and the commitment to Mississippi State that Will Rogers showed this offseason in his leadership. Mississippi State is in great hands here with their star quarterback back for 1 more season. Maybe 2, but at least 1 more season.
Coach Keggs, TV and College Station. Will Rogers, last couple of years, has had his way with A&M, honestly. I think over 730 yards, passing 6 TDs, no interceptions. Just what's he mean to your program as your quarterback?
Yeah, Will's done a lot of good things over the last several years, right? Versus a lot of people. It's pretty comforting to know you got a quarterback coming back who's got the most SEC starts of any quarterback in the league going into this season. All right, he's the SEC career completions record holder. I think he owns 29 different school passing records. I mean, the guy's a football guy. Right? And he is Mississippi State. He's a football guy. And simply put, right at the end of the year, he could have went in the transfer portal and he could have went anywhere in the country. Right? You see the way guys are getting recruited out of the portal. If they have any experience or game fill at all at the Division I level, they're pretty valued because experience is valuable, right? Age and maturity is valuable in this sport. And, I mean, he didn't consider that once, right? And I think that speaks volumes. And a lot of guys in our program, not just Will, older guys who were impact players for us last year, right? They made a decision to come back. I think that speaks volumes about what they think about our program, right? The environment that we have inside our building and the trajectory that our programs are.
And I think that's huge because when you have this much turnover in the transition, you got to have leaders step up. And it's clear as day, Will Rogers, it's his team right there in Starkville, Mississippi. And he even had a fun comment, his own, here during media days. Since we're talking Georgia, I thought they would love this too. But what makes it so tough going up against them Georgia Bulldogs on defense? Let's kick it over to Will Rogers.
Jalen Carter's pretty good. Everybody on their defense is a 5-star or plays for the Eagles, so they're pretty good.
Well, of course, half the damn teams in the NFL play. I mean, it's all about the players, man. Georgia's got the players. That's been evident the last couple of years on the field, no doubt. Next, let's kick it over to our interview, Stefan Krajisnik from the Clarion Ledger. A little deep dive on them Bulldogs. Let's kick it over to Steph. We're here with Stefan. Steph, please pronounce your last. I want to see if Shane can get it.
Krajisnik.
Krajisnik. Oh, okay, that's easy. Why do I screw that up every time?
I'm listening. Okay, sorry. All right, there we go. Say that again. I'm sorry.
Krajisnik.
Krajisnik.
There you go.
Oh, yeah.
Shane's got it
That's
down.
my middle name.
He's the brains of the operation. Well, Steph, of course, covers Mississippi State down here at SEC Media Days. What was impressions, Zach Arnett, first time at Media Days?
I mean, he spoke a lot like a coach who'd been here before, right? Like, he didn't look nervous up there. He was pretty confident. I mean, he's talking about, Mississippi State making the expanded playoff and contending and, the history they've had of, recent 9-win seasons like last year and the first-round picks that they've had. I mean, he speaks like a guy who, he has been at Mississippi State for a while, right? He's been there as a defensive coordinator, but, for a first-year head coach at any level, he doesn't sound like it, right? He sounds like a guy who's confident, and I think, for State fans and for some of our readers, I think they like to hear that because there's so many questions surrounding the program. What's he like as a head coach? What's the offense going to look like under Kevin Barbay? To have him go up there and pretty matter-of-factly be like, oh, I don't care about this narrative about State not being good because we're going to be good, right? He backs it up with the history and the stats. He's a real confident guy.
And the consensus, not with everybody, but with most people, is Mississippi State will be 7th in the West. I assume that's where they're going to be voted in the poll.
That's what I would imagine, yeah.
Why will Mississippi State finish better than 7th?
Well, because you look at the last, decade or so of state football, and, they've been predicted to finish last multiple times, and they've only maybe finished last once or twice in that stretch. They just don't. They're not a program, or at least haven't been, especially under Mike Leach, that has, the bottom fall out or, fall out at the during the season, right? I mean, you see a team like Auburn last year, A&M, that when it gets bad, it gets bad, right? And it starts to snowball. State's done a good job, and I mean, it's a Mike Leach mantra that I think the players that the veterans have really bought into of, play the next play. They could flush out the week before. You really don't see losing streaks for this team, especially, since Mike Leach came in 2020. You really haven't seen that, collapse of a season. So I think that State's in a position with 8 home games this year. Obviously a tough SEC West schedule, but they're kind of at a point where, they know that, if they lose to an Alabama, they can bounce back the next week wherever they're playing and kind of flush it quick. They've done a good job of that. And that's why I just don't see a world in which State, goes 1-7 or 2-6 in SEC play, right? I just see, this is a team that's so, consistent in their approach and so veteran heavy that, 3-5 seems like worst case to me. And that might not even be in last place this year because I got thoughts on other teams.
Yeah. What are you most impressed with Zach Arnett since his time taking over? Because I thought the way he kept the recruiting class together was great. The SEC experience he got in his coaching staff, keeping key defensive players from leaving the program. There's a lot of things to like about Zach Arnett. What has impressed you the most?
I thought what impressed me the most was just how he handled the changing of the staff in the offseason. I think there was, and I was part of this group of the hot boards that come out when he's named head coach of, who's going to be his offensive coordinator. Everyone was looking at air raid guys, trying to, keep the staff together, keep kind of the similar system. And I think, Zach looked at the mirror and he said, it's tragic circumstances. No one thought that was how he was going to become, a head coach in the SEC. I think everyone saw it coming maybe down the road, but, this early and under those circumstances, obviously unpredictable. And I think he looked at it and he said, it's his team, right? It has to be Zach Arnett's team. It can't be, what would Mike Leach want me to do? What would he do? You got to approach it your own way. If you're thinking, down this other route or second guessing, it's going to take you down the wrong path, right? And I think he looked at it. He said, doing this type of offense, a more balanced attack with Kevin Barbay is the way to go. Moving away from that air raid, he felt was the way to go. And I think for a guy who has no head coaching experience to make a decision like that, after replacing a legendary coach, right, someone who coached for 2 decades, head coach much longer than 2 decades overall. It was really impressive to see, his confidence in doing that and not really, second guessing what people were going to say about his decisions.
Me and Mike, huge Mike Leach fans, and obviously a huge tragedy there at the end of the season. But we're seeing a lot of tributes. I mean, Sankey started out without a tie. Texas Tech's coach had the lining of the jacket. Is there something that you're hearing, maybe some sort of tribute that Mississippi State's going to be doing this year?
No, nothing that I've heard, necessarily for like a whole season type plan or something like that. I mean, I'm sure that
Will Rogers wear an eye patch on the field.
that would be pretty awesome.
I don't recommend it, but
or a mustache.
Yeah, Minshew style. I think you'll probably see that first home game because keep in mind when Leach died in December. First game after that was the ReliaQuest Bowl, and then it was the offseason, right? So they haven't had a home game since this past season. So I think you're going to see something emotional come in or some sort of tribute. At Davis Wade Stadium when they welcome Southeastern Louisiana. You still see it. I mean, around Starkville everywhere, though. Like, people still got their pirate flags out. Like, there's we had Mississippi State had a recruiting camp a few weeks ago or a couple months ago, I should say. At Davis Wade Stadium, and I was in there, watching these high schoolers, interact with these coaches and do things, and you look up kind of where some of the suites are, and there's one suite that still has like the Mike Leach flag. I mean, on the wall and there on the window or whatever. You see it all over Starkville still. Like his presence for someone who was only there, 3 years, his impact was felt heavily in his time there. So I think you'll see throughout the year tributes and little things like that, and maybe something a little bit grander in that first game for him.
What's the biggest question you have for this team at this point? Is it offensive line, safety, tight end?
Safety. They're losing a lot of production at safety. The defensive front and the 3-3-5 that they run, and they're going to keep with Matt Brock just being promoted from linebackers coach to DC. They kept a lot of the defensive front there. Jet Johnson, Nathaniel Watson, guys. Jaden Crumedy was here. I'm confident in what that group can do. But you look at maybe just the secondary as a whole. I mean, not even just safety. You're looking for 3 new starters, so that's a thing in and of itself. But at DB too, you're losing Emmanuel Forbes, right? That's a big loss. And a couple of years ago, you lose Martin Emerson, and Forbes has to step up be the number 1 guy, and he did that exceptionally, right? I mean, broke records. Now he's gone. Camion Richardson was the number 2 guy. He's got to step up and be the number 1. Can he make that jump? So you got a lot of questions in the secondary, which remember in 2021, when they were kind of up and down, I think they finished 7-5 if I'm not mistaken. Kind of up and down, a bit inconsistent. A big reason was some of the struggles that they had in the secondary. So I'm going to be interested to see what that unit looks like this year because I think it could dictate a lot of what this defense looks like.
Any new wrinkles or anything different you think with the defense with, Zach Arnett, obviously, Matt Brock back. I think most people assume same old, but by changing the offense, by being a little bit more ball control, hopefully, not as many passes.
Yeah.
Does that aid the defense, or are they going to add new wrinkles? Because I would imagine, I know he let Arnett kind of be the head coach of the defense, but I would even imagine there was still some limitations on what he wanted him to do. Now there's no limitations on the side of the ball. We all love Mike Leach, but the defense has been the stronger part of Mississippi State the last couple of years.
Yeah, no, the defense has been good, and they have so many players coming back, like I said, on that front. I think the scheme itself, it'll be pretty similar. I mean, they're going to run a 3-3-5. It's going to be pretty similar to what you've seen in the past. I don't think, now, obviously, we haven't seen it outside of the ReliaQuest Bowl. I mean, Matt Brock has only really run the defense for 1 game. I don't think he's going to be as aggressive as Arnett was. I think Arnett had some pretty, free reign of, be as aggressive as you want. I think now, Arnett's not running the defense, but he'll be in Brock's ear a bit more, and I think Brock himself is a bit more reserved than maybe Arnett was with some of that pressure. So maybe you'll see a little bit more conservative play, but don't be surprised if a conservative approach isn't working, if Arnett's in that headset being like, hey, blitz them, send them.
Now, a lot of State fans like to look at the schedule and say, hey, we got 8 home games.
Yeah.
But I think more important than that, their 4 away games are all winnable.
Yep.
South Carolina, Arkansas, I think.
Arkansas, A&M, and Auburn.
And they've owned A&M, which is the toughest of those 4, I would say. So, I mean, are the pieces in place, schedule-wise at least, for this to be – I'm not sitting here saying they're going to win 10, 11 games, but does the schedule set up for them to be arguably the biggest surprise in the SEC?
I kind of want to piggyback off that, too, because you look in September, they've got LSU, they've got Alabama. It ramps up pretty quick, too.
Yeah, the schedule is set up in a way that they can have a big year, right? They can have another 9-win season. You mentioned the 8 home games and the winnable road games. I was literally talking to someone yesterday being like, if State, those 4 road games that we mentioned, A&M, Arkansas, Auburn, and South Carolina, if they went 4-0, if they went 0-4, if they went 2-2, on those, I don't think you'd be surprised with any result, right? Like they've shown that they can win on the road. Like you said a couple years ago, they went into A&M and won. They came back from down 25 at Auburn a couple years ago. They should have won at Arkansas a couple years ago, if not for the whole kicking debacle, which everyone famously remembers, right? And then South Carolina, we'll see what they look like this year. The pieces are in place. If they can be consistent, if this offensive scheme can be picked up, quick enough, and the players can get comfortable in it. Like you said, though, the problem is, do I think this team can succeed with Kevin Barbay as OC? Yes. Do I think he's going to be a good offensive coordinator? Yes. It's still tough to implement a new offense over the course of one offseason, right? Like you saw, in 2020, the air raid was not compared to what it was in 2022, right? Like there was a big difference, and COVID plays a part into that too. But, I think now looking at it, it's still going to be tough to implement a new offense. How will they perform in some of those tough games early, right? Like their offense, I would imagine, will be better late in the year than it is early in the year, just as you get more comfortable, get game experience. But you're thrown into the fire there, like you mentioned. You got LSU early on. You got Arizona as a non-con game early on too at home. Like it's not a walk in the park schedule in September to let you kind of ease into things, right? It's a tough schedule, and I think that to some extent, State fans are probably kind of bummed that LSU game is early. It's an 11 a.m. game early in the season. State's competed with LSU the past few years. They win that game in 2020. In 2021, they make some mistakes at home that probably should have been more in that game than it looked like. I mean, last year in Baton Rouge, they kind of just fall apart there in the fourth quarter. They have the muff punt and all that, and that's probably a game they feel like they should have won. They led it for 3 quarters, right? So it's like they've shown they can compete with some of these bigger teams, with the exception of Alabama, who they, for whatever reason, just can't score against. But like you look at what they've done in the past few years against these teams, they can compete, right? So now it's a matter of will everything fall into place? Will they feel comfortable enough with this offense early in the year to compete? With a powerhouse team, or at least for this season appears to be a powerhouse team in LSU. How can they compete early in the year? I think that's where your question marks lie.
Yeah. You may have just answered this, but with talking Alabama and LSU, but both at home, you got to pick one. Which one Mississippi State more likely to beat? And keep in mind, the reason I ask that is because I may be on an island here, but I like LSU to win the SEC. I think they're going to win the national championship. I think they could be that good. Don't let that sway your answer.
Well, I just finished my preseason ballot, and I guess I don't know if I'm allowed to say what I voted yet, but I voted LSU to win the West. I picked Georgia to win the SEC as a whole, but right. That's not a really hot take.
Will.
Yeah, and that's. But I see where you're coming from. I think LSU this year is legit. Like they're the real deal. They're really good. I think everything they return. I mean, like. They've got big names coming back. This isn't like, they got a 5-star who was decent last year who's going to step up in a bigger role. No, they got guys who proved it last year that are coming back, with an SEC West title already under their belt. But with that being said, I would say State has a better chance to beat LSU just on the basis of, for whatever reason, the Alabama logo, like, when State's lined up against Bama, they just don't look like the same team. I mean, a couple years ago, Bama comes into Starkville and just beats the brakes out of them. And then, last year, State scores a garbage time touchdown for their only points in the game. In a game where the defense, relatively quieted. Bryce Young, right? Alabama didn't have that great of an offensive game. I think they scored in the 20s or something like that. They had like less than 100 rushing yards, which never happens at Alabama. So for whatever reason, State just hasn't been able to compete with Alabama. More than the last few years. It's been about a decade of just being, not competitive in games against Alabama. So we'll see. I think LSU's the better team and they're the tougher opponent. But for whatever reason, State's been able to compete with them. So I'll say I think the LSU game will be closer. But we'll see what happens with Alabama's quarterback competition, I guess, right? That's the biggest question.
What was State's reaction when they found out divisions were going away?
Thrilled. Have you seen next year's schedule?
I think that's an talked about discussion. Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Arkansas. These teams stand to benefit so much from not having to play the West Gauntlet year in and year out.
Right. I mean, next year they're playing. It's like Missouri and Florida at home, and it's slipping my mind exactly what the schedule is. But you're not facing Alabama. You're not facing Auburn. Like it gets easier. I think LSU's not on next year's schedule. Like it's going to be, from a fan perspective, there's the good and the bad, right? You love the rivalries. Right. You love, every other year LSU's coming to Starkville. Every other year, State's going to Tuscaloosa. Like that's fun, right? And that's been going on for, decades upon decades of these rivalries. But at the same time, you look at the flip side, and you're like, well, now you get to see Florida come in more often. You know, Florida hasn't played state since like, you know, Dan Mullen first left or something like that. Like they haven't seen Florida. You get to go to Gainesville now. Like I think it's a benefit for the fans in the long term. I think fans will enjoy the fun in that. And I think if you're State of saying, hey, you know, you don't got to face these teams every year, you'd be thrilled. I mean, and the schedule, I mean, with the way the schedule fell, too, for State of, you know, getting Tennessee and Georgia next season, like, you're still facing an equivalent of, like, Alabama and LSU, right? Like, you still got your juggernauts. But at the bottom of it, I mean, like, you're facing Missouri instead of Arkansas. I know you guys had talked about the Missouri, Arkansas being like a better program that just can't be Missouri for whatever. Like I saw that clip.
It wasn't us saying it; it was others. But yes, that was definitely us.
But
we
when
know
you
what
look
to
at
throw
it,
out
like
there.
if you're State, you'd rather face Missouri than Arkansas, right?
Yeah.
Like, Arkansas recruits players out of Mississippi. Like Arkansas, I think, is the more talented team.
Everyone's attacking Mizzou.
Right. I know. Poor Mizzou. Poor drink. You know, I was messing with Ben Portnoy, who covers South Carolina. We were talking literally yesterday out at a bar in Nashville. We were like, so you realize Drink is like 4-0 against South Carolina, right? Like, at what point does Ben Portnoy write the story of Drink owns South Carolina? So I was like, let's see what happens this year. But no, people dunk on Missouri and Vandy and the SEC. But you know, I think at the end of the day, right now you'd rather face those teams than an Arkansas and you know, and an Alabama and an LSU and A&M, you know, Auburn, teams like that. I think it's just a reality, and I think, you know, going away from divisions, I think it's a good thing for Mississippi State.
Yep.
But I will say, I think State benefits from it staying an 8-game SEC schedule than a 9-game.
Right.
For obvious reasons. I mean, you're adding another SEC game. It's going to make it tougher, and you kind of look at, you know, the SEC of your extra game is probably going to be a tough one, right? Like you're not going to get thrown in with, you know, Vandy, you know, on your schedule every year. So I think State benefits from the 8-game schedule, but does benefit from the no divisions.
Well, really appreciate you stopping by, Stefan. Before you go, can you tell the audience where can they find all your work and follow you on social media?
Yeah, at ClearandLedger.com, we cover State, and David Eckert covers Ole Miss for us. And on social media, I'm at SKRAJISNIK3 on Twitter, and can't remember what my Threads name is, but I'm on there too. If people want to follow me on there, it's like, I think it's like Steph KRAJ or something like that. So find me on Threads too if you're into that kind of stuff.
All right, appreciate you, man.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, last but not least, Vanderbilt. Clark Lee and company made the short trip. I think I saw Clark Lee there every day. I think he just walked in. I'm sure he knew Tuesday was his day, but I swear I saw him there Monday, Tuesday, I think Wednesday, and he may have not been. A lot of people go to media days. They don't stay on Thursday. We stayed till Thursday. So Clark Lee, of course, landed a contract extension. Very excited about the direction of Vanderbilt's program. Snap that embarrassing SEC conference losing streak last fall with 2 big wins over Kentucky and Florida. Got to keep that momentum going. Here's Clark Lee on building a winner, playing to an identity. They have to do it differently. More than anybody else, they have to do it differently at Vanderbilt. And the mess they've inherited, they are miles and miles ahead of where they were. They still have miles and miles to go, though.
Tyler Shaw with KBTX and College Station. Coach, last year you talked about the expectation being Vanderbilt competing for SEC championships. I guess, how do you feel like you are on that trajectory, and do you feel like the team and the guys have kind of bought into that?
I don't believe that you should ever be a part of something that doesn't strive for the highest levels of success. And yet we can't have big goals and big vision and not have airtight process, right? I mean, it's one thing to say, it's another thing to actualize. And I don't want to be a part of a program that doesn't aspire to the highest levels of success. And I know that Vanderbilt football is capable of that. Good things take time, but this will be as good of a team as we've had to this point. And again, that doesn't guarantee us anything. I just said in the big room, I mean, our margins are really thin. And we have to play to an identity and execute and limit our opponent and be really smart in our design, or else, you know, we're not going to be as successful as we could be. And yet, if we do those things to a high level, we've proven the ability to be competitive and win in this league. And for us, it's having the telescope, the big picture vision, but then shifting quickly to the microscope and what we're doing in our process day in, day out, ultimately to find out how good this team can be. And, you know, as we sit right now, we've got great designs on great success. But what I know to be true about any college football journey is there's going to be adversity. What I'm excited about is I love the people that I work with. So I get to problem solve with people that I care about, players and coaches and administration. And anything you do in life, you want to strive after the highest level. You want to do it with people you care about. You want to look to your left and your right and feel like, you know, these people are making me better and they're challenging me, and that's what makes me so excited for this season. You know, this is the most excited as I've ever been for a fall, and it's not because I think it's going to be easy. You know, it's actually because I think it's going to be really challenging. But the depth of relationship and the depth of authenticity we've grown in our building is something that I'm really proud to be a part of.
Right side, third row.
Nick Alvarez.
Let's round out the show with a great interview with Chris Lee from Vandy Sports. Really appreciate talking to Chris. He's one of the nicest guys in the SEC. Very kind with his time. Going a little deep dive here of the Vanderbilt Commodores down at SEC Media Days. We're here with Chris Lee, Vandy Sports. Big year for the Commodores, year 3 under Clark Lee. They said it going into spring. The goal this year is to make the postseason. Did they accomplish that goal?
They might. It's going to depend on the schedule, and I think they got a good open. They've got 3 of the first 4 they're going to be favored. The Wake game in week 3 in Winston-Salem is going to be a big one because they'll be an underdog, but Wake won't have Sam Hartman. And Wake will still be good, probably favored, but that's a game that if you're going to get to a bowl, you need to win, and it's winnable. And road venues have not been, I guess, as troublesome for them as home, and you know the situation there. But I think if they can get 4-0, they've got a shot. And what will be interesting is Game 5 will be Kentucky. Mm-hmm. That's a game they won in Lexington a year ago. And then Game 6 will be Missouri. That's one that they lost last year, but they were maybe a first down in the last 2 minutes from winning. So, I mean, I'm not saying they're going 6-0, but there's more of a path for them for a good start than there almost ever is.
What SEC game do you think is most winnable? Is it the Kentucky or Missouri? And because another one that I like, and I know fans are optimistic there, but I'm thinking that Auburn game. Late in the season, first year under Hugh Freeze. Everybody, when they say Hugh Freeze, they just say, oh, he beat Nick Saban twice. They don't say he lost to Vanderbilt twice. They don't say he's got a losing record in the SEC. And I'm not sitting here saying he's a losing coach, he's terrible, but year 1, complete makeover of that staff and really the roster. I don't think that game's a given either.
Yeah, that's one that I would circle. I don't think Auburn is what Auburn's been. It's a little bit of a rebuild. Brian Harsin didn't recruit at a really high level. They're changing offenses. But I said this, I would rather have Auburn the first half of the season than the second half when they're getting used to Hugh Freeze and the ways of doing things, because sometimes late in the year it clicks. And so they got that game later in the year. Yeah. It is in Nashville, which probably helps. But that's the one caveat I'd put. But, yeah, I would put that on the list. And Florida and Gainesville, they've won down there a time or two. They won last year. Florida, I think, is probably a bottom 3 or 4 team in the SEC. Some might disagree, but I would think those are 2 more on the back half of the schedule that if you're going to say, let's say they win 7 or 8 by some miracle, and I'm not saying they will, but if they did, I think those would be 2 that they would get.
What has impressed you the most in 2 years under Clark Lee?
I think the change of the culture. I mean, he took over a wreck. And usually when Vandy makes a coaching change, it's not a great situation, but that was worse than normal. Yeah. And I think coming in, and he tells stories of the first meeting that he ever did of kids wouldn't make eye contact. They were slouched over in their seats. And he told a story, I think, last year in spring practice. He said, we went out one day and we've got a Saturday scrimmage. I've got a bunch of kids on the field, 2 or 3 hours before the scrimmage. And he said, I picked up the phone to go yell at a coach to say, hey, we're supposed to have these guys sleeping in. And found out it was a player-led workout before scrimmage. And that was kind of one of his first indicators that he felt he was changing the culture. Last year they won 5 games, which was, the losses weren't pretty, but in the wins column, that in my mind put them a little bit ahead of schedule. I just think that the speed of progress and culture change was at a time where it was just morale was through the bottom of the floor. Yeah. Bad. I think to me to be able to get kids excited about it again was big.
Can I ask you about the Ray Davis situation? For a lot of people that aren't paying attention, it wasn't that he wanted to leave Vanderbilt. It almost felt like he had to. Can you kind of explain to listeners that situation and how that led to him in Kentucky?
Yeah, I think that was. I mean, sometimes it's not easy to get in grad school there.
Yeah.
And I had, this is a baseball analogy, but I had somebody tell me, hey, look, if you take the top 25 kids in the portal in baseball, they might be able to get 5 of them in.
Yeah.
And baseball players are, probably a little more academically minded than your average football kid. Grad school's another thing. There's been a lot of times they could have kept kids, they couldn't get them into grad school. That's always been a little bit of an issue. I'm told it's better than it's been before, and to throw stones at Vandy for not getting Ray Davis in grad school might be unfair because I don't know what his grades were or weren't.
Right.
But look, it's more of an issue for them than it is other schools. I mean, he was a fine player for them, best player they had on offense a year ago, and I think he'll fit in well at Kentucky.
Yeah. How well is Vanderbilt positioned in the NIL world? Because I mean, it just depends. School to school, it's different. But I think I've heard them say, we're going to prioritize the guys on the roster, which was the intent of the whole thing anyway. But we all know the other schools in this conference were not going to do it that way. But do you think they are positioned, at least maybe just in philosophy alone, to be successful in the SEC?
Well, I mean, look, comparatively, I'm guessing they're 14 of 14, but it's more than I would have thought. They got a couple of basketball players. They got one back, and they won allegedly a war for another transfer, which I mean, it's been a few hell is frozen over moments on the beat the last few years. One of them has seen them spending the money that they're doing on facilities. You walk over there right now, and there's a giant hole in what used to be the closed end zone. There's going to be 2 really nice buildings, and I'm not saying they got the nicest facilities in the SEC, but Mike, I'm guessing they're spending about $500 million on everything. It might be a little bit more, and some of that might be inflation. We live in times where things are a lot more expensive than when they started this. But between that and being able to pay, I mean, they could have lost C.J. Taylor last year. They didn't. They could have lost Will Shepherd last year. They didn't.
Right.
They could have lost A.J. Swan last year. They didn't. No, they did lose a starting defensive back, Jajias Richard. They lost him to Miami. I think that had something to do with it, too. And they're not going to, I think they lost a couple kids in recruiting that way too. But the fact that they're spending anything and they got boosters on board and the school is kind of behind it, that's not something I would have predicted 3 years ago.
Yeah.
What do you think the facility upgrades, specifically the stadium, what do you think that does bare minimum for Vanderbilt? Is it respect? Is it, at least we're spending something to show future players that, hey, we are committed to turning this thing around?
Well, I mean, it's ironic because the minute that they do that, here comes NIL and all these other things, and you can, facilities used to be the thing. That's what got kids there, and now it's like facilities. Let's go get the cash. But
they had to do something.
Well, it's kind of like saying you need a car to get to work, right?
Yeah.
And okay, well, you need a car. We just all need a car. Well, what if mine's got holes in the floor and you can see the road and you're driving a Lamborghini, and that's the SEC. You at least need to get a more serviceable vehicle.
Yeah.
For the optics, if for nothing else. So yeah, I mean, it's going to have to make a difference. I mean, they've had nothing. That stadium, they basically built it or upgraded it in 1980, and they really haven't done anything to it other than to rip out the turf every few years and paint the walls. I mean, the bleachers are probably the same ones that have been there for 40 years. They needed to do something. It's going to look a lot better. It won't be probably till 2025 until it's done, and I don't know why they couldn't get it done faster. To me, they should have. A&M rebuilt the whole stadium in a year.
Right.
For $450 million. I don't know why. Now, look, it's more of a challenge here than it is in College Station because look around you, you see the construction cranes literally out the window that I'm looking through as I'm looking at you. It's a little harder to get construction here because it's everywhere.
Right.
But that's my one criticism. I wish they would have done it faster. But like I said, if you'd said 3 or 4 years ago they're going to spend that kind of money, I would have said you're crazy.
I know Shane's a huge A.J. Swan fan.
Oh, yeah. This is his year, ain't it?
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, sometimes you see kids that have got a lot of pressure on them that sophomore year.
Right.
And I'm not just talking Vandy, just in general. Sometimes it just crashes. He's going to have a lot of pressure. I've dropped the Jay Cutler label on him in terms of arm strength, and maybe that's unfair. But, I've been going to practices there for 20 years. I've seen every quarterback they've had. He's the only guy that's in that ballpark.
Okay.
And he's not. That's probably unfair because he's not Jay athletic.
Right.
Jay Cutler was an all SEC, or excuse me, first team All-State shortstop in high school. He was All-State basketball player,
right.
And of course you know what he was in football. And AJ Swan's not that kind of athlete; he's just a football kid. But the confidence in the arm. I mean, I watched them last year. They went to Northern Illinois, and at the time it was Northern Illinois was probably better rated preseason than it ended up being.
Right.
But it's September, and sometimes teams are closer to being good. When they go up there and they're down, I don't know, 10 or 14 points, and he leads them from behind, and he throws 4 touchdowns and no picks. He makes a throw to Ray Davis that you can look up. I mean, there's about a window about that big, and he threw the ball probably 40 yards in the air.
Right.
And when you're doing that in your first start on the road, I don't care if it's Northern Illinois or who, that was a big-time throw. And that game got my attention, getting the start, having all the pressure on you, leading them from come behind win. He only threw 2 picks all year.
Yeah.
Now, health's going to be an issue. He had trouble staying healthy a year ago, and so I'm going to keep an eye on that, but the tools are there.
Yeah.
How big of a loss do you think Mike Wright will be?
I don't think it'll be a big loss. I think that they wanted Swan to be their guy ahead of camp. I mean, I was hearing talk about that already. They've got – everybody forgets they've got Ken Seals, who in 2020 started the whole year, had 2 or 3 300-yard passing games, pretty accurate. Frankly, I thought Seals might have had a better spring than Swan did. But Swan's their guy, and understandably so. There's a bigger upside there. But he's a kid who stuck around. He's in year 4. He's played for a bunch of OCs. They're finally getting the same one back-to-back, which is going to help everybody. But I think that, look, they're not going to run a system with A.J. Swan that's going to be ground heavy.
Yeah.
With Mike, he was a 10-600-meter guy. That's a different universe in terms of speed. A.J. Swan only runs when he has to.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. To me, it was apples and oranges what they were going to do with those guys. And they've got a guy that when they go to Seals, if they go to Seals, he's a lot more like the guy that's their starter.
Well, obviously Swan got banged up a little bit last year. Have you noticed anything in camp? Maybe he's put some weight on. He's moving a little bit better. I mean, you don't think health's going to be like an ongoing concern there, do you?
Well, I mean, his issues last year where he got hit in the head a few times. And they blocked decently well. They allowed fewer sacks than they did the year before. I don't know how much that was getting rid of the ball faster or not. I think they just protected better in general. But, yeah, I mean, I'm sure he put on a little bit of weight. I didn't notice the weights last year and this year because most freshmen do. But, that was just a matter. That wasn't an arm issue or a leg issue. It was just, you getting hit in the head.
Yeah.
Any school you're gonna be held out.
I got you.
Do you think this is the year we start to see some of that defense that I thought we were getting under Clark Lee? And admittedly, I mean, what he inherited, it's not like he could just come in and snap his fingers and the defense was going to be great. But they've been awful at times. Let's call it what it is.
Yeah.
Do you think they take that step in year 3?
Well, I mean, they've been awful for 3 or 4 years running. They gave up, 35 2 years ago and 36 last year, something like that. It's been bad. I think they gave up 8 yards a throw last year, or a little bit over that. And I say per throw, that takes sack yardage out of it. So when the ball actually got in the air, it was even worse. They're going to have to be better. I just don't think they had a lot of personnel, to be honest. They've not had the speed in the secondary. I don't think that the rest of the league's got, and they haven't had a pass rush. And that's a really bad combination. When you can't get to the quarterback and your guys aren't as fast as the guys covering. And like you saw that blow up several times last year, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, the teams that could really get after you.
Yeah.
But then there were some times like Kentucky, where Kentucky gave up, 41 sacks a year ago. They got to Will Levis. They made stuff happen. They won a game because of that. I think they're better on the defensive line, no question. They've also got a lot of guys coming back like Nate Clifton, Christian. They're not household names in the SEC, but there's value of guys in the league where you can put 7, 8, 9, 10 guys on the field that don't kill you, and that they're getting more to that spot. They've got some younger guys I think are going to get after the passer better, and so I think that's their hope. I still have questions about their secondary safety. I think they'll be okay. Corners where I'm really concerned for. I don't even know who it's going to be yet. I mean, it could be B.J. Anderson. and that other spot it could be any one of, I don't know, maybe 4 sophomores.
Yeah.
And that's their recruiting was better. That class they brought in 2 years ago, they targeted that as our get better, get more athletic class. But you see a lot of dudes that are first rounders in the NFL that first year starting, they struggle. There's just a learning curve. So to me, it's that, and can they get a pass rush this year? I think the second one they'll answer better. The first one we'll wait and see.
I got you.
The one thing I really like about Clark Lee, it seems like his teams at Vanderbilt play better at the end of the season than they certainly do at the start. That's everyone's goal, but it's easier said than done. I think a lot of people are sleeping on just how much better Vanderbilt was at the end of the year. Because of the Tennessee loss, it was so lopsided, but heck, they had a 2-game winning streak in conference play. I mean, there was a lot of people thought Vanderbilt was going to win that game because Tennessee just got upset. They've got nothing to play for. Do you think people around the league are kind of sleeping on the momentum that Clark Lee's built?
It's hard to say. I mean, you could argue that maybe Florida and Kentucky. I mean, because look, when they go to Lexington and win that game, they're on a 26-game SEC losing streak. Now they come close. They had a shot at Missouri a couple weeks before, so there were some warning signs. But to me, when you've lost 26 straight games, and every time you play a game in your house, there's more people there rooting against you than for you, and all the other stuff. I mean that's a lot of stuff to overcome, right? And so teams might have been overlooking them, but they had enemy number one looking in the mirror too. I mean, I would think that's going to make it easier if you're fill in the blank with whoever they play. You can just point to film last year and say, hey, guys, they might be picked last in the league, but Kentucky and Florida thought that too, and they both got beat.
Right.
But I think if you're an opposing staff, that makes it a little bit easier sell than when they lost 26 in a row. I mean, you could say that all you want, that, hey, you got to watch out for these guys, but when you got a losing streak like that, how seriously are 20-year-old players going to take you? I don't know. So I think that'll get people's attention, but it's also going to get them confidence too, and confidence is a big thing for them. They just didn't have much of it, so it's going to be interesting to see how that all washes out.
Did you come on the field after that Florida game? I was looking for you. I didn't see you there.
I can't remember if I was down there or – I mean, usually we're getting to the press conference and just trying to make we don't miss it.
Yeah.
So I think I was down there for a little bit.
Yeah,
but
that's cool.
Yeah, it was – yeah.
Do you have any reaction to NCAA going easy on Tennessee? And feel free to give us your hottest of hot takes. I mean, the rest of the SEC seems like, what the hell? I mean, I guess we can just openly cheat now and there's no penalties.
Well, look, I've wondered this, and I said it the day that everything dropped and whenever, and I was like, okay, how do you now – all these things that were legal yesterday are now, there's no speed limit.
Yeah.
Right. So I've always kind of wondered, like, the question I had for a few years is, like, how are they going to reconcile those two things? The NCAA is also, I think, when's the last time the NCAA took a really bold stand on anything in the NIL era? I mean, it's much different now.
Yeah.
And you hear the thing about not wanting to punish the kids. I don't know, the fine kind of seemed like that's the thing that satisfies everybody. I mean, fans don't care, right? They're not paying the $8 million fine.
Right. And they remember the wins. You can vacate them. That does
take
nothing,
them away.
Yeah, I mean, I heard something interesting this morning. The league lobbied really hard for Tennessee not to lose a bowl game, and they didn't. That seemed like probably to please everybody.
Yeah.
Punishment other than maybe the other 13 fan bases. But, yeah, I mean, I didn't know what was going to happen. I do wonder if NIL is not a thing now, does it look differently? But it is what it is.
Last thing I got for you, Chris, really appreciate your time. You do a great job, Vandy Sports, Southeastern 14. The fans that love this show, they'll love Southeastern 14. You cover all SEC. You guys are doing a great job. Are you changing the name, though? It's 16 now.
Yeah, we fortunately, in one of the few times I thought ahead, we bought Southeastern 16 when we founded the company in 2021. Now, look, I didn't know it was going to be that quick. I think we bought 18 and 20 just in case. But
let's buy 24.
Yeah,
they're just thinking ahead.
Here's a lesson in branding. I was having this conversation with somebody this morning because it's the second time I've been asked that. Because, look, the internet's been around for a minute now.
Yeah.
And so to get a domain name for something as popular as SEC football, I was like, you need something that's going to catch people's attention and not be that long and whatever. So I thought that's pretty good because if you're looking at it, that's not probably not too close to get you sued by the league, but everybody knows what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
You know, and the minute you stake your brand with that in there, it's like, maybe I could have made a better choice. But I spent the whole off season thinking about what would it have been, and every time you look, whatever you think of is taken. So
Yeah.
I guess we did okay.
Hey, before you go, can you tell our audience where's the easiest way to find all your work?
Yeah, Vandy coverage, go to vandysports.com. We've got a podcast, so we usually upload that to the website. And then Southeastern 14, go to YouTube, search Southeastern 14. That's where we park most of our stuff there. And just looking forward to a great year of covering both. It'll be fascinating.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was great. All right, guys, so that's all I got on this episode of the show. Another monster show here, trying to get through all these interviews and trying to get all the content out to all you guys. It's probably going to take a month for some of you to listen to this week's worth of shows, but these interviews were so great. I don't want any of it to go to waste. Really, really, really appreciate everybody showing up at SEC Media Days, giving us their time. Really appreciate each and every one of you for tuning in. To all the cousins out there, we'll see you on the next one. And Cousin Shane, he'll be back before you know it.